Welcome to my channel. Spice and Fiction presents Danmachi, Sword God Successor, Volume 1 Part 1, an original fanfiction series written by Spice and Fiction and narrated by AI. This story is a world of divine blessing. Belle brings forgotten technique through hardship and talent. Thank you for joining this adventure. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's start the story. Prologue: The Myth of the Sword God. Tenryamura, the Heavenly Dragon Village. Located deep within the northern frontier, where icy winds strike the earth like blades and winter never fully sleeps, lies Tenryamura, the Heavenly Dragon Village. Nestled at the foot of Broken Sword Mountain, it stands as the last living remnant of a forgotten age, an age when men rose through discipline, not fauna, through breath, not blessings, through steel, not miracles. Long ago, the mountain had another name. But legend claims the sword god himself cleaved it in two with a single, world-shaking stroke. The demon that sought to devour the continents was slain in that instant, its monstrous body sealed beneath the fractured peak. The cut remains clearly visible even after centuries, a perfect, unnatural split from summit to base, as though reality itself had been severed. After defeating the demon, the sword god built a school in Tenryamura, a sanctum where anyone child, warrior, noble, farmer could walk the path of the blade. For generations, the village thrived as the birthplace of countless swordsmen. Its breathing arts, precision footwork, and spiritual blade disciplines echoed across nations. Tenryamura was once a beacon, a place where mortals could surpass their limits without divine aid. But the age of gods changed everything. When the deities descended and introduced fauna, the world shifted overnight. Divine blessings offered strength far beyond human training. Power became a gift, not a journey. And the ancient school of the sword god, once a proud pillar of mortal discipline, slowly faded from the world's memory. Students dwindled. Techniques were forgotten. The great halls fell silent. Yet the sword god foresaw this twilight. On the eve of his death, when his body grew frail but his spirit remained unbroken, he received a visitor, Kusanagi-hime, goddess of the sword and technique. She bowed to him with respect no deity gave lightly, for she recognized a truth. This mortal surpassed even divine warriors. In their final meeting, the sword god imparted to her the last flame of his legacy, his symbol, teachings, and the path he carved through the world. As his soul drifted into eternal sleep, Kusanagi-hime vowed to become the caretaker of his shrine and his school. Though the world forgot the sword god, Tenryamura did not, and neither did the goddess who inherited his will. Gray clouds smothered the sky, turning the heavens into a heavy, muted canvas. Only a few thin slivers of light pierced through the cloud cover, touching the earth like faint blessings from distant gods. The icy winds swept across the small village below, whispering warnings of the coming season. Villagers tightened their cloaks, hurriedly finishing their trades before the storm arrived. Yet a few remained outside, fishermen repairing nets, craftsmen packing away tools, children laughing as they chased the first flakes of frost. On the far end of the settlement, a hill rose gently against the bleak sky. At its crown stood an old shrine, dedicated to a myth so ancient that even the elders spoke of it with reverence. The shrine grounds stretched wide, containing a dojo, a forge, and several small buildings, remnants of a once great institution. Though centuries had passed since its construction, the villagers still climbed the hill to offer prayers, leaving offerings beneath the worn stone statues of legendary swordsmen. On the cobblestone courtyard, a young shrine maiden swept fallen leaves, her movements steady and elegant. She wore her hair in a neat hime cut, adorned with pearl ornaments, tied together at the back with a crimson ribbon. Each sweep of her broom sent dry leaves skittering across the stones, only for the wind to scatter them again. She paused, releasing a soft sigh, her breath visible in the cold air. Snowflakes began to fall, small, delicate, drifting like feathers. "Winter, already," she murmured. She quickened her pace, finishing the last of her sweeping. Gathering her robes, she turned toward her modest home beside the shrine. That was when she heard it, heavy footsteps pounding against stone. Startled, she glanced toward the old stairway winding up the hill. A figure emerged through the haze, a hooded woman, wrapped in thick, travel-worn cloth, clutching a bundle close to her chest. Her voice broke through the cold air, trembling and desperate. "Help me, please. Help." The shrine maiden dropped her broom instantly and hurried forward. As she reached the stranger, she placed a hand on her arm only to recoil slightly. The woman's skin was ice cold, colder than the winter wind. "Quickly," the shrine maiden urged, slipping her arm around the woman to support her. Inside, You'll freeze out here. She guided the shivering stranger through the shrine gates, shielding her from the falling snow. Whatever lay within that bundle of cloth. It was small, light, and faintly warm. The winter storm deepened as the shrine door slid shut behind them. Years passed. Winter came and went in gentle cycles, each one carving its mark upon Tenryamura. Seasons shifted like slow-turning pages, and the once fragile bundle the hooded woman carried that fateful day had grown into a bright-eyed child who ran across the shrine courtyard with a wooden sword far too big for his small hands. The villagers, at first wary of the sudden arrival of an unfamiliar woman and her newborn son, soon came to accept them. The mother, frail, quiet, and still haunted by exhaustion, never once spoke of the world beyond the northern frontier. She worked in the village when she could, prayed at the sword god shrine daily, and watched her child with a tenderness that made even the gruffest villagers soften. She named him Bell. And Bell grew like a spark searching for wind. By the time he could walk, his feet wandered naturally toward the shrine's dojo. By the time he could speak, he demanded a wooden sword of his own. The shrine maiden who had taken responsibility for both mother and child found Bell sitting before the great, weathered statue of the sword god every morning at dawn, mimicking the stance carved into its ancient stone posture. What began as curiosity quickly revealed itself as genius. The child swung his wooden sword with no guidance, yet his movements carried a strange grace, unrefined, yes, but filled with an instinct that made the elders whisper. When the wind blew, he moved with it. When leaves fell, he tried to cut them midair. Sometimes he succeeded. Just like the old legends, one villager murmured during the harvest festival. Or perhaps the shrine really did call to him, said another. But tragedies linger like shadows. Bell's mother weakened with each passing year. The cold stole her breath. The winters grew harsher. And when Bell was barely 5, she no longer had the strength to rise from her futon. Her final words, spoken in the quiet shrine house, trembled like a falling leaf. Please, watch over him. Let him grow strong. Let him be happy. The maiden held her close as the light faded from her eyes. A soft winter breeze swept through the open sliding door, gently brushing Bell's tear-streaked face. From that day forward, the shrine maiden, once simply a caretaker, became Bell's guardian. She taught him how to breathe with purpose, how to listen to the wind, how to steady his heart like a drawn blade. She told him stories of the sword god, of courage, of discipline, of standing tall even when the world felt overwhelming. Bell absorbed every lesson with wide-eyed wonder. And as he grew, so did the faint silver glimmers that sometimes flickered around him, shimmers no one else could see, signs of a destiny quietly awakening. Tenryamura continued to live its peaceful rural life. Snow fell, seasons turned, villagers aged. But those who passed by the shrine felt something shift. A sense of pressure in the air. A presence watching. A promise forming. The shrine of the forgotten sword god, silent for centuries, seemed to breathe again. And at its heart, a white-haired boy swung his wooden sword with fierce determination, each strike echoing across the courtyard like the heartbeat of a legend being reborn. Chapter 1. Arriving at the big city. Morning sun poured its golden light over the land, its warmth embracing the world with the first breath of summer. The once cool northern winds had shifted, now carrying the thick, searing heat of the season. Fields shimmered like molten gold. Trees stood still under the weight of the sun. Travelers pulled their hats low, their bodies fighting against the heat with every step. Along a dusty road heading south, a wooden cart creaked steadily onward. The horse pulling it snorted under the burden, hooves beating a slow rhythm against the earth. Inside the cart, shaded by a simple canopy, several travelers sat shoulder to shoulder. A pair of elderly merchants quietly counted coins. 2 teenagers whispered excitedly about finding work in Arario's markets. A middle-aged woman fanned herself, complaining about the weather. Another man spoke loudly about the Tower of Babel, claiming it was visible even from the plains on a clear morning. Seated among them, perfectly still despite the heat, was a white-haired boy. Cranel. He sat cross-legged with a straight back, eyes closed, breath steady and controlled. His shoulders rose and fell rhythmically. Each inhale, sharp yet calm. Each exhale, long and precise breathing shaped through years of discipline. Before him lay a sheathed katana wrapped in white cloth, resting gently across his lap. Even covered, it radiated quiet sharpness. The chatter around him faded into background noise. The jostling of the cart did not disturb his steady breathing. His fingers rested lightly on the wooden floor, his posture unshakable. In the years he trained at the shrine of the sword god, Bell's world was a cycle of dawn training, disciplined breathing, focused meditation, and endless sword swings. Kusanagi had taught him everything she could: how to breathe like a flowing river, how to strike like falling snow, how to calm the heart like a sheathed blade. But one day she left, not abandoning him and trusting him. Kusanagi departed to fulfill a duty only she understood, leaving Bell as the new caretaker of the shrine, a role he accepted with both pride and loneliness. Seasons passed. Winters came and went. The shrine never lost its quiet serenity, but the world outside continued to move. Then, the letter arrived, sealed with divine ink bearing Kusanagi crest, and one sentence written in elegant strokes. "Come to Oreo. Your path begins there." Bell opened his eyes. The cart crested a hill, and in the far distance, shimmering through the wavering heat of summer, the Tower of Babel touched the sky. The murmurs around him rose in excitement. Bell's heartbeat quickened. The city of heroes, the center of the world, the place where myths were reborn, where the sword god once walked. He gripped the sheath of his katana gently. "Kami-sama, I'm coming." The wooden cart rolled to a gentle stop before the massive gates of Oreo, its wheels finally still after days of travel. The moment the driver called out their arrival, the passengers hurried off eagerly, driven by excitement more than comfort. One by one, they stepped onto the packed earth road, lifting their eyes, and every single person froze. Even Bell. The gates of Oreo towered above them like a fortress wall built by giants. Sunlight gleamed across the stonework, and beyond the archway, the shadows of bustling streets and towering buildings painted a vivid promise of life and adventure. Far, far in the distance, stretching so impossibly high it pierced the very sky, the Tower of Babel shimmered like a pillar of silver glass. Bell felt his breath catch. So this is the city of the gods. The scale, the sound, the sheer life of it, nothing in the northern lands compared to this. Tenrimura, with all its peaceful charm, felt like a distant dream now. Travelers began lining up for inspection. Merchants, adventurer hopefuls, laborers, families, everyone eager to pass through the divine city's walls. Bell joined the line quietly, clutching his katana's sheath against his side. His stomach fluttered with both excitement and nerves. When it was finally his turn, a guard in polished armor stepped forward. "Plaque of identity, please." Bell blinked, then reached into his sleeve. He pulled out an old, wooden plaque smooth from age, carved with flowing patterns, the crest of the sword god school etched in golden ink. He held it out politely. The guard's eyes widened instantly. Is this real?" Another guard approached, curiosity turning into shock the moment he saw Bell's plaque. "That emblem, that's the mark of the sword god's lineage." Both men straightened their backs, nearly stumbling over each other in the rush to show respect. Bell, caught off guard by their reaction, waved his hands awkwardly. "Oh no, it's nothing big. Really, I just trained at the shrine." The guards exchanged glances, clearly not believing his modesty. One placed a hand over his heart and bowed his head respectfully. "We mean no offense, young master, but for someone to carry this crest, it is a symbol of a legendary sword school. Our fathers and grandfathers all heard stories of its disciples." Bell flushed crimson. He scratched the back of his head, letting out a nervous laugh. "Ha, I am not really that amazing." But the guards insisted. "It's an honor, truly. Please enter Oreo. You're welcome at any time." Another added with a grin. "Feel free to visit the markets, the forges, or the guild. If you need directions, don't hesitate to ask. Anyone will be glad to help someone of your prestige." Bell bowed gratefully and stepped past them through the giant gates. As the sunlight washed over him and the roar of Orario's busy streets filled his ears, he felt it. A new chapter had begun, and the path of the sword god's successor had finally led him to the center of the world. The busy streets of Oreo felt completely foreign to Bell. The moment he stepped past the gates, he was swallowed by a vibrant storm of color, sound, and life. People rushed past in every direction: adventurers in gleaming armor, merchants wearing luxurious silks, mages wrapped in flowing enchanted robes, noble women flanked by guards, and wandering craftsmen carrying bundles of tools on their backs. Bell glanced down at himself. He wore a crisp, white kimono embroidered with silver thread, paired with a formal hakama and a traditional kamishimo over his shoulders, garments symbolic of the sword god shrine. It stood out painfully against the casual and battle-ready fashion of Oreo. People turned to look, some curious, others simply admiring the unusual sight. Bell released a long, tired sigh. "I really should have changed clothes." Still, he continued wandering through the streets, eyes widening with every new sight. Stalls lined the roadside selling fruits from distant kingdoms, shimmering ores mined from deep within the dungeon, exotic trinkets, potions, talismans, enchanted accessories, and weapons of all shapes and sizes. At one stall, Bell stopped in his tracks. A forge display showcasing swords, spears, knives, and leather-crafted gear gleamed beautifully under the sun. The metal shone with a polish he had never seen outside the northern lands. Even the simplest dagger radiated a balanced weight and precise edge. Curious, Bell picked up a short sword. The smith at the stall raised an eyebrow, not stopping him. Bell tested the blade's weight, rotating it comfortably in his palm. Instinctively, he performed a few practice swings, gentle arcs, precise movements that showed flawless control. The sword cut through the air cleanly, humming with quality. He lowered the blade carefully, coloring his voice. This craftsmanship, it's leagues above what I've seen. Even a simple kitchen knife here might rival the best swords back home. The red-haired smith standing behind the counter stiffened, then reddened noticeably. He scratched his cheek awkwardly. "Well, I don't know about that," he muttered, eyes darting away, "but I do try." Bell blinked. Oh, he'd embarrassed the craftsman by praising him too bluntly. Bell bowed lightly in apology, a gesture from his upbringing. "I meant it sincerely. The forging quality in Oreo is incredible. The balance, edge retention, metal purity, everything is refined. I may know a thing or two about weapons, but this is truly something else." The smith stared for a moment. Then he broke into a grin. "You really know something about forging, don't you? Most customers don't even hold a blade correctly, much less feel its center of balance." Bell shook his head modestly. "I only have basic knowledge. I just trained a lot and handled many swords." "Huh. That's more than enough for me." The red-haired man wiped his hands on a cloth and stepped forward, extending a hand. "Name's Welf. Wolf Krotzo. Blacksmith." Bell returned the handshake with a polite smile. "Bell Cranel." Wolf's eyes brightened. "Cranel, huh? Well, Bell, you've got a good eye. And you swing a sword like you were born holding one." Bell laughed softly, embarrassed. Welf leaned against his stall. "If you ever need repairs, sharpening, or custom work, come find me. I trust you with one of my blades." Bell blinked in surprise. "That means a lot. Thank you." Wolf smirked. "Anytime." The two shared a brief nod, an unspoken promise of future friendship forming between them before Bell continued down the bustling street, the weight of his katana resting gently at his side as the path of Oreo stretched out ahead of him. Bell left the blacksmith district with a lighter step, comforted by the thought that he had found an exceptional craftsman who could one day repair or perhaps even improve his cherished blade. Welf Krotzo. The name stayed with him. Bell sensed that their paths would cross again. For now, however, a different concern filled his mind. Where was Kusanagi-heim? Her letter had summoned him to Oreo, but she never described where she would be waiting. Bell had assumed he would feel her presence immediately. Yet the city was so massive, so alive, so noisy, that her familiar aura was nowhere to be sensed. He sighed softly and continued weaving through the bustling streets. Without realizing it, he had wandered into Orario's market district, one of the busiest arteries of the entire city. People rushed past him in chaotic waves, merchants shouting deals, adventurers buying supplies, children running between stalls, street performers juggling colored flames. The overwhelming chorus of voices, footsteps, clinking coins, and excited chatter filled the air. Bell blinked, startled by how lively it all was. Then a different sensation caught him. A smell. Freshly baked bread. Slowly roasted lamb. The scents drifted through the air like invisible hands tugging at him. His empty stomach made its opinion very clear. Brew ol. Bell stiffened, cheeks heating. Before he could steady himself, he turned and collided gently with someone. "Oh, I'm." A soft gasp met his apology. He found himself face to face with a beautiful young woman, her silver hair tied with a crisp white ribbon. She wore a black blouse, a neat white skirt, and an apron over it, classic attire of a tavern maid. In her arms was a basket full of fruits and vegetables, now slightly jostled from the bump. Bell froze. His mind emptied. She was stunning. Her eyes shone like polished crystals, and her smile, small, gentle, polite, hit him harder than any monster could. "I'm so sorry," Bell blurted out. "Are you hurt? I wasn't looking where I was going, and you your basket, are you all right?" "I mean." The girl blinked. Then she laughed softly. "I'm fine. Truly." She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, cheeks turning faintly pink. "But you're making a strange face." Bell immediately realized how dumbfounded he must have looked. His embarrassment exploded. "I'm sorry. Really. Here." He knelt quickly, gathering the few scattered fruit that had fallen, and stood to hand her the basket. But he hesitated. Um, may I help you carry these? She raised an eyebrow in playful amusement. Shouldn't you introduce yourself before you offer to help a lady? Bell felt his soul leave his body. His hand shot behind his head in pure panic. Aha, right. Sorry, I am Bell Cranel. Her expression softened. Sir Flova, she introduced, offering a polite bow. A tavern maid at the hostess of fertility. It's nice to meet you, Bell. She held out the basket, allowing him to take it. He did so gratefully. And so they walked, Bell carrying her groceries, Seer smiling gently beside him, while the busy streets of Orio bustled around them. Bell had come to Orio searching for his goddess. He hadn't expected to encounter kindness or beauty so soon. When Bell followed Seer through the doors of the hostess of fertility, he was immediately swallowed by warmth, laughter, and the scent of fresh cooking. The tavern was alive with noise-clattering plates, roaring laughter, and mugs slamming on tables. A lively crowd of adventurers, merchants, travelers, and smiths filled every corner. The moment Seer stepped in, several regulars lifted their mugs. Seer's back. Welcome home. Oh, and who's the boy? Bell froze. Seer giggled softly. Everyone, this is Bell. Be nice. But the one who noticed him fastest was a petite tavern girl with short brown hair and adorable cat-like ears twitching atop her head. She grinned wickedly as soon as her eyes landed on him. Well, what's this, Naya? Seer brought home a cute one today. Bell nearly jumped. He clutched the grocery basket tighter while his face turned bright red. Seer only laughed and guided him toward an empty table near the warm stone hearth. Come, Bell. You can sit here. He nodded, set the groceries carefully on the table, and took a seat, still recovering from the sudden ambush of attention. But the cat-eared maid wasn't done. She sauntered over with a teasing sway, leaned down slightly, and purred. Nya, Seer, where'd you find this adorable boy? He looks like he's going to faint from blushing. Bell sputtered, all color rushing to his face again. I'm not. I mean. Seer covered her mouth, laughing behind her fingers. Anya, stop teasing him too much. You'll scare him. Oh? But Seer, you brought him here, that means you like him, right? Nya. Seer giggled harder while Bell looked ready to melt into the floor. Finally, Seer took pity and made proper introductions. Bell, this is Anya Fromel. She teases everyone, don't mind her. Anya winked. Especially cute boys. Bell immediately looked away, desperately pretending to study the wooden grain of the table. Then, Grolrel. Bell's stomach betrayed him at full volume. Both Seer and Anya froze mid-tease. Bell wanted to die. Seer smiled warmly and placed a hand on his shoulder. Wait right here. I'll bring you food. I have money. Nope, Anya chimed. First meals on the house, Naya. Before he could argue further, the two whisked the groceries away and vanished into the kitchen. Left alone, Bell took a deep breath and tried to calm his racing nerves. As he waited, he glanced around, absorbing the tavern's energy. Merchants were exchanging contracts over mugs of ale. Armored adventurers boasted about dungeon kills. Craftsmen argued passionately about weapon commissions and mithril quality. Drunks laughed loudly, hugging each other while singing off-key. The hostess was chaotic, but also warm, alive, comforting. A place full of stories. A place Bell already liked. Eventually, footsteps approached. Bell glanced up and nearly startled again. An elf stood before him, short green-yellow hair tied neatly with a white ribbon, sharp golden eyes, and the same black blouse and white apron uniform. Her movements were elegant but efficient, her expression calm, yet slightly stern. She set a plate down in front of him with surprising grace. Your food. Don't waste it. Bell blinked. Thank you. Her brow raised slightly, but she said nothing more before walking away. Then the aroma hit him. Roasted meat seasoned with herbs he couldn't name. A pot of rich stew, steam drifting into the air. A fresh slice of bread with a golden crust. A small block of cheese, soft, creamy, fragrant. The first bite nearly made him tear up. He'd never eaten anything like this. Northern meals were simple river trout roasted over fire, rice, thin soup, wild herbs. But this was warmth, comfort, flavor that danced on his tongue. He devoured everything. The world is big, and it tastes amazing. For the first time since leaving Tenryamura, Bell felt genuinely excited for what awaited him next. Bell leaned back in his chair with a satisfied sigh, his stomach finally full for the first time in days. As he wiped the corner of his mouth, soft footsteps approached. He looked up. Seer slid gracefully into the seat beside him, her smile warm and sweet enough to stop his heart for a moment. Without warning, she gently took his hand in both of hers. Did you enjoy the food, Bell? She asked softly. Bell's brain short-circuited. Her hands were warm. Her eyes sparkled, and she was close, far too close for his unprepared heart. His face ignited into a shade of red that rivaled molten steel. Why, yes. It was amazing, he blurted. But he shook his head, forcing himself to focus on what truly mattered. There was someone he needed to find in this enormous city. Someone important. He straightened his posture and, despite still holding Seer's hand, looked at her seriously. Seer, I need to ask you something. Do you know someone named Kusanagi? Seer blinked. Then her lips curled into a sly grin. Oh, is this a girl you like? She teased. Falling in love after just arriving in the big city, how romantic. Belle's entire soul nearly left his body. And no, it's not like that. I mean, she's not, I'm not. He couldn't form a proper sentence. Seer giggled behind her hand. That was when Anya slid into the conversation like a mischievous shadow, her cat-like ears twitching with excitement. Now did I hear something about our cute little Belle looking for a girl? She purred. Belle looked like he might explode. I am not. You've got it wrong. The two tavern girls laughed brightly, their teasing lighthearted and warm. Something in Belle's chest loosened. He had never experienced people this friendly, this open, this teasing yet kind. It made him feel welcome. He smiled, then even chuckled softly. Seeing this, Seer and Anya's eyes softened. Seer leaned forward. So, Belle, who are you looking for? Belle inhaled deeply, calming himself. Kusanagi. She raised me. She runs the shrine of the sword god in my village. She sent me a letter telling me to come to Orio. But I haven't found her anywhere. Seer and Anya exchanged thoughtful looks. They both tapped their chins. Where would a sword lady go, Naya? Before they could form an answer, a cool, steady voice joined the conversation. You should visit the guild. Belle turned. Standing before them was the elf from earlier, the serious one who served his meal. Her short yellow-green hair framed a face both stern and graceful, her golden eyes sharp yet calm. The guild maintains the city's records, she continued. If she has registered as an adventurer, she will be listed there. And if not, you may post a request for information. Someone may know her whereabouts. Belle blinked in awe. Seer smiled brightly. Belle, this is Ryu Lion. She's my close friend and one of our best workers here. Ryu gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Belle lit up. That's it. That's exactly what I should do. Without thinking, pure, overflowing gratitude guiding him, Belle jumped to his feet and pulled Seer, Anya, and even Ryu into a sudden, tight hug. Thank you. Thank you so much. All of you. The tavern froze. Seer blushed pink. Anya's ears shot straight up. Ryu's eyes widened, pure shock overtaking her normally stoic expression. He set them down gently, beaming. I'll come back to thank you properly. I promise. Then he sprinted out the tavern doors, vanishing into the bustling streets of Orio with renewed energy. Left behind, the three tavern girls stood frozen in disbelief. Seer, he hugged all of us. Anya and Ya, even me, Ryu, I allowed a human male to touch me. Silence. Then Seer laughed softly. He really is. Something special, isn't he? All three of them, still dazed, could only nod. Belle sprinted through the crowded streets of Orio like a silver-white arrow, his movements fluid, balanced, and controlled. Every step flowed into the next. No wasted motion, no hesitation. To onlookers, he was little more than a blur weaving gracefully between travelers, merchants, and adventurers. A few gasped, pointing after him. What was that? Did a level 4 just run past? No, I think that was a kid. Belle ignored the voices. His focus was sharp, his heartbeat aligned with his breath. He scanned signboards and rooftops, searching for the direction of the guild hall. Then, a cold pressure stabbed at his spine. Belle froze instantly. The breath inside his lungs coiled like a drawn blade. His feet halted mid-step, body turning with instinctive grace. His hand slid to the hilt of his katana, thumb pushing lightly against the guard in preparation for a quick draw. Killing intent. Sharp, deliberate, foul. The kind that meant someone was about to die. His awareness spread out in a circular wave, an old technique hammered into him by Kusanagi. Every voice, every footstep, every shift of air became part of his perception. Across the street, several adventurers stiffened at the same time, hands drifting toward their weapons. Scarred men and hardened women, all with senses sharp from years in the dungeon, recognized the murderous aura and moved into defensive positions. The atmosphere shattered. Normal citizens felt the dread like a cold hand around their throats. Screams erupted. Panic spread like wildfire across the marketplace. Belle took a single breath, long, deep, steady. He reached into his sleeve and pulled out a red string. With practiced efficiency, he tied his white hair back into a tight ponytail, clearing his vision. His heartbeat slowed. His breathing deepened. Flow state. Begin. His silver eyes sharpened, flaring faintly like a blade catching moonlight. Time stretched. People moved sluggishly, their reactions slowed to a crawl. Even the veteran adventurers moved faster than civilians, yet still far too slow in Belle's accelerated perception. Except one figure, an old woman moving through the terrified crowd. She should have been frozen with fear. She should have been stumbling away like everyone else. But instead, she walked, one deliberate step at a time, unbothered by panic, unhurried by chaos, her cane tapping rhythmically on the cobblestone. Belle's breath hitched. No, she wasn't walking slowly. In his heightened perception, she was the only one moving at a natural speed. She wore a ragged brown cloak and an old hood that hid most of her face. Yet her presence carved through the crowd like a blade. The adventurers began closing in around her, hands tightening on their weapons. Belle's instinct screamed, "Danger! Move!" But he wasn't fast enough. The moment the nearest adventurer stepped within arm's reach. Crack! The old woman's cane exploded apart. A black blade burst from within, drawn in a single terrifyingly smooth arc. Her frail voice shifted into a deep, monstrous roar. Demon Fang's sword style FRM1. Helman Cleaver. A double horizontal slash ripped through the air so fast, it looked like reality itself was torn. Blood sprayed. Two adventurers were cut cleanly in half. A third fell without even realizing he had been struck. The hood and cloak shredded apart from the force. Her true appearance was revealed. A gaunt, wrinkled face twisted into a demonic sneer. A single red horn jutted from the left side of her forehead. Her kimono was black and tattered, fluttering unnaturally. And her arms grotesquely elongated hung, so low they nearly brushed the ground. Belle's breath froze. A demon. In the middle of Oreo. His hand tightened on his katana. This wasn't a monster. This was something else entirely. Something that should not exist above the dungeon. And it had just begun killing.
Like and subscribe for more Danmachi fanfiction.
Chapter 2. Sword got arrested. The once busy market streets of Oreo erupted into chaos. What had moments ago been filled with laughter, bargaining, and footsteps now cracked apart under shrill screams and raw terror. Stalls overturned, fruit rolled across the cobblestones, and civilians sprinted in every direction, tripping, shoving, scrambling for safety as the demonic old woman's aura swallowed the street whole. Belle's heart hammered against his ribs. He had seen monsters. He had trained against fear. But the murderous presence radiating from this creature. It was suffocating. She had eliminated 3 seasoned adventurers warriors with scars, experience, and years in the dungeon in one fluid technique. If he hadn't witnessed it with his own eyes, Belle would never have believed it. The remaining 4 adventurers hesitated only a moment before instinctively locking into formation. 3 stepped forward, shields raised, forming a tight barrier of steel. Behind them, the last member, a young mage, spread his feet, lifted his staff, and began to chant. Mana gathered around him in spiraling threads, the air crackling as power built. Belle knew the chant well. A low tier but fast spell, something that could at least stagger the attacker. But the demon moved first. Her voice ripped through the air like a razor. Demon Fang's sword style. Form 4 infernal pounce. She lunged. Not stepped, not dashed, but lunged, her body blurring like a black streak across the battlefield. The 3 shield bearers braced, grounding their feet and pressing together to form a perfect defensive wall. Their timing was perfect. Their stance was flawless. They were ready. It didn't matter. The demon didn't hit them. She passed through them. Their shields didn't stop her. Their bodies didn't stop her. She moved as though slipping between the spaces of the world. In less than a breath, she was suddenly behind the front line. Her blade came down. A clean vertical stroke. SCHLK. The mage didn't even finish chanting. He split cleanly in 2, falling apart as blood splattered across the cobblestones in a macabre spray. His upper half slid left. His lower half toppled right. The shield bearers froze. That's impossible. How did she? She moved through us through solid steel? Their confusion became panic. Their panic became paralysis. The demon hunched, muscles coiling, horn glowing faintly like a hungry ember. Her voice cracked the air once more. Demon Fang's sword style. Form 2 ravaging claw wing. Her blade twisted into a wild reverse grip. Her elongated arms tensed, ready to unleash a flurry that would butcher all 3 adventurers in heartbeats. Belle moved. He didn't think. His breath deepened. Flow state. The world slowed again. His foot slammed forward, cracking the stone beneath it. His hand flashed to his hilt. and his body light as the wind, sharp as a drawn blade, became a white streak. Whoosh! A white blur appeared in front of the demon just as her strike descended. Steel clashed with steel. Belle's katana intercepted the descending blow, perfectly angled, just so, wrists aligned, stance rooted. Sparks burst as the demonic aura ground against the shrine-forged blade. The street shook. The three adventurers staggered backward, eyes wide in disbelief. He stopped it. That kid, how is he moving so fast? Is he level 4? Level 5? Belle's eyes narrowed, breath steady, face grim. The demon snarled inches from him, her jagged teeth exposed. Both blades pressed against each other, and the battle shifted. For the first time, the demon had been stopped. Belle exhaled slowly, letting his breath settle into the calm rhythm drilled into him since childhood. He slid his katana back into its sheath, click, and shifted his stance. His feet aligned, knees bent just enough, one hand resting lightly on the hilt. A ready-to-draw posture. A swordsman's promise. The demon froze for half a heartbeat, then burst into shrill, delighted laughter. Good. You're not boring, she screeched, her elongated arms twitching with excitement. Let me see you die properly. She crouched like a feral beast, her demonic aura boiling and twisting around her. Demon Fong sword style. Form 6. Demon core rupture. Her blade arced upward. But Belle moved first. His katana flashed. Not fully drawn, only half the blade slipped free. But that half glowed. A blazing red aura flared along the steel, like molten fire channeled through moonlit metal. The demon's technique collapsed mid-swing. She skidded backward violently, her eyes widening, her horn trembling. For the first time, fear genuine, instinctive fear flickered across her monster-like face. It lasted only a second, but Belle saw it. He sheathed his sword again. Another gust of wind erupted, whoosh, followed immediately by a shockwave where the demon had stood. The demon's left horn fell cleanly onto the cobblestone, cut so sharply it looked polished. The demon clutched the side of her head, trembling. Sweat dripped down her wrinkled skin, but her fear transformed quickly into unholy fury. A monstrous surge of mana exploded outward from her body. Boom! The three nearby adventurers were slammed to their knees, choking under the unimaginable pressure. Her muscles bulged grotesquely. Her veins thickened, crawling across her skin. Her horn stump pulsed as she roared. Demon Fong sword style. Form 7. Savage Dominion. The transformation was immediate. Her body became feral, too fast, too unpredictable. Her limbs elongated further, claws scraping sparks against the stone. She lunged at Belle with a distorted scream. Belle tried to parry. He failed. Crash. She struck with 10 times the strength of earlier. Belle was hurled across the marketplace, boots scraping against the ground as he barely regained footing. She did not stop. Slash after slash after slash. Each blow felt like a boulder smashing against his blade. The impacts shook the air, ripping through stone structures, collapsing stalls, snapping lamp posts like twigs. The marketplace was becoming a battlefield of broken stone and shredded earth. Belle's arms numbed. His breath shook. He needed calm focus clarity. He closed his eyes for a single instant and inhaled. Breathing technique awakened. The insignia of his fauna normally dormant flared like a burning sun across his back. Flow state deepened. The world slowed again. The demon's movements, once impossible to track, became visible, understandable, predictable. Belle's presence expanded. A red aura erupted from his body, rising like a column of fire. It swallowed the surroundings. The three adventurers collapsed instantly, losing consciousness beneath the crushing weight of his energy. Even the demon staggered mid-attack, her eyes widening in animal alarm. Cobblestones shattered beneath Belle's feet. The earth trembled. His hair whipped violently in the rising wind. He slid his katana into its sheath one last time, straightened his spine, focused every cell, every breath, every ounce of spirit into a single, perfected motion. Belle whispered, Sword God style. Flow state. Form 1. World-cleaving genesis. Boom! He vanished. Or rather, he transformed into a streak of white lightning, a divine line carved through reality as he dashed straight toward the demon. The demon roared back in desperation, lifting her black blade. Demon Fong sword style. Form 1. Hellmaw cleaver. Her slash met the lightning. For a fraction of a second, a single impossibly bright collision froze the world. Crack. Then it ended. Belle reappeared behind her, mid-lunge, katana half drawn in a finishing pose. His body wavered. His breath faltered. He dropped to his knees and coughed blood onto the broken stones. Behind him, The demon twitched. Her sword cracked, fractured, then burst into motes of fading black light. Her body followed, disintegrating silently, dissolving into nothingness until not even ash remained. The marketplace fell still. Bell knelt alone in the settling dust, blood dripping from his lips, his katana trembling at his side. He had won, but at a cost his body was only beginning to feel. A loud clanking of metal boots echoed through the ruined marketplace, growing louder, sharper, and more organized with each passing second. Bell, still kneeling and breathing raggedly, lifted his head as a full squad of armored adventurers stormed into the scene. The Ganesha Familia had arrived. Dozens of them poured in, each clad in matching steel-plated armor, wielding spears and shields marked with the emblem of the great elephant god. Their disciplined steps trembled the ground, forming a semicircle around Bell with practiced precision. One adventurer stepped forward and shouted, "Halt! Do not move. You are under arrest." Bell blinked. His exhausted mind registered their presence, their shouts, their weapons all pointed at him. He did not stand, did not resist. Instead, he simply raised his head and looked at them. For just a moment, killing intent flared. Sharp, heavy, instinctive. The kind forged through battle, still fresh from life-or-death combat. The Ganesha adventurers froze mid-step. A collective shiver ran down their spines. Shields quivered. Spears wavered. Even armored veterans felt the pressure of a predator turning its gaze toward them. But then, Bell smiled weakly, scratching the back of his head like an embarrassed child. Aha, sorry about that. Bad habit." The killing intent vanished as if it had never existed. The adventurers stared at him, stunned. What in Ganesha's name was that? How did he switch like that? Level 4 pressure. But he's a kid. Still wary, they advanced again, this time in flawless formation. Spear tips aimed. Shields raised. They surrounded him with enough manpower to restrain a rampaging monster. One adventurer carefully approached from behind and removed Bell's katana from his belt. Another produced enchanted shackles and cuffed Bell's wrists, ensuring he could not perform another killing draw. Bell did not resist. He simply sat there, breathing slowly, exhausted beyond thought. Meanwhile, other members of Ganesha Familia fanned out, securing the perimeter and evacuating stunned civilians. A small medical team arrived, lifting the unconscious adventurers onto stretchers and loading them into a wooden cart. Bell was placed separately. A reinforced wooden cart with steel bars, a mobile cage usually reserved for violent criminals or berserk adventurers. That's the last of them. The scene is secured. The crowd of armored adventurers parted as a powerful presence stepped forward. Shakti Verma, captain of the Ganesha Familia, strode across the shattered cobblestones. Her milky white skin was contrasted by crimson armor, and her intense eyes scanned the carnage with a mixture of weary professionalism and irritated responsibility. She massaged her temples. This damage. All of this will cost a fortune. Her gaze swept from the destroyed stalls to the cracked stone pavement, to the collapsed lamp posts and bloodstains. The reconstruction bill alone would make any poorer familia cry. An armored subordinate approached quickly. "Captain Shakti, the area has been secured. The criminal has been restrained and placed in the back of the transport cart." Shakti closed her eyes and exhaled heavily. "Of course he has." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "Move out. We're taking him to headquarters." "Yes, Captain." As the squad prepared to leave, Shakti called out to another adventurer. "You run ahead to the guild hall. Report everything. Request an official interrogator. This mess needs to be sorted out immediately." "Yes, ma'am." With orders given and the ruined marketplace left behind, the Ganesha Familia began their procession escorting Bell Cranel, the mysterious young swordsman who appeared from nowhere and fought like a demon, unaware that this single incident would shake Oreo to its core. Meanwhile, inside the guild hall office, chaos reigned like a storm with no end. Stacks of parchment littered desks. Guild officers shouted over one another. Runners sprinted back and forth delivering updates. The entire hall felt as though it was shaking under the weight of panic. A massacre in Orario's market district was rare, borderline unthinkable. Property damage in the millions. Civilians injured. Several adventurers dead. An unknown assailant involved. The guild was not prepared for this kind of report. At the center of the storm stood Ina Tool, her glasses slightly crooked, her usual calm expression hardened into something dangerously close to frustration. She snapped orders with remarkable efficiency. "Doran, file an emergency reconstruction request. Lilia, confirm the number of casualties, double-check the bodies. No, Jorii, that form is for monster attacks, not civilian massacres. Use the red parchment." Her voice echoed through the hall as she seized another set of papers from a trembling assistant. Then the door slammed open. A Ganesha Familia adventurer marched in, armor dented from earlier exertion, and handed Aina a sealed scroll. Report from Captain Shakti Verma, ma'am. Aina took it immediately, already bracing herself. She broke the seal, unrolled the parchment, and froze. Her emerald eyes widened. This must be a mistake. The officer shifted uncomfortably. It's accurate, ma'am. A child caused all of this. Aina whispered, skimming the report again. Unidentified youth, approximately 14 to 15 years old, armed with a katana, eliminated high-level adventurers, and generated catastrophic damage with unknown sword skill and magic. Her stomach twisted. A child with enough power to destroy a district. A child capable of killing seasoned adventurers. A child who fought a demon-like entity and lived. Aina's mind flew to every worst-case scenario she'd ever studied. An unstable prodigy. A survivor of illegal magic experiments. A cursed child. A rogue deity's creation. No matter the truth, the danger was undeniable. The Ganesha adventurer cleared his throat. Captain Shakti formally requests a guild interrogator to question the boy. Immediately, Aina straightened her glasses. I'll take the case. The entire office paused. You, Miss Aina? Are you sure? That boy might be dangerous. Shouldn't we send someone more experienced? Aina shook her head firmly. He's a child, and a child should not face this alone. I will handle it. Her calm conviction quieted the room. But around her, the guild hall was still in utter disarray. Tellers scrambled through paperwork. Adventurers waiting in line stared at one another, whispering in confusion. Quest submission booths overflowed. News of the massacre had spread too quickly, creating panic and uncertainty. Aina released a long, weary sigh. So much for a normal workday. With swift motions, she gathered essential documents, crime reports, interrogation forms, magical signatures, fauna records, and emergency evaluation sheets, stuffing them neatly into her sack bag. She turned to the Ganesha adventurer. Lead the way. Let's meet this. Cranel. The adventurer nodded and escorted her out. As she stepped through the guild doors, Aina felt a strange tightness in her chest, a mix of fear, dread, and something else. Concern. For a boy whose name she didn't know until now, but who might change Orario forever. The Ganesha Familia served as Orario's standing army, its shield, its order, its stabilizing force. Whenever monsters escaped, whenever riots sparked, whenever laws were broken, it was the Ganesha Familia that marched first. Their discipline was unmatched. Their numbers were vast. Their presence kept the city stable. But their headquarters was something else entirely. Bell stared up with widening eyes as the transport cart rolled to a stop. A colossal 30-meter stone statue towered above him, shaped like the god Ganesha himself, seated cross-legged in dramatic flourish, arms extended and trunk raised proudly. The armor plating and defensive walls blended into the absurdly large sculpture. But the part that broke Bell's soul just a little. The fortress was officially named. I am Ganesha. Bell felt a full-body cringe ripple through him. How is this even allowed? To make matters worse, the main entrance was positioned at— Are you serious? The crotch. Indeed. The entrance to the Ganesha Familia stronghold was right between the statue's enormous stone thighs, forming a tunnel into the fortress interior. Bell slumped in defeat. This city is insane. But there was no time to dwell, because the Ganesha guards escorted him inside without ceremony, down a long hall lit with enchanted torches. The interior was far more serious: steel doors, reinforced walls, and disciplined soldiers patrolling with stern expressions. He was brought to a lower floor, the holding area. There, guards shoved him gently yet firmly into a crude iron cell. Bell looked around. Iron bars formed the cage, stone bricks lined the walls, and a single long bench bolted to the wall served as the only furniture. 3 other adventurers were already inside, gruff, scarred, and wearing the unmistakable expressions of habitual criminals. When they saw Bell, their eyes lit up disturbingly. Look what we got here. Fresh meat. Pretty boy's gonna make our stay fun tonight. Bell blinked. The guard slammed the cell door shut and walked off. The 3 criminals wasted no time. They lunged at him like hungry wolves. Bell took one step to the left. They missed completely, crashing into the bars. The criminals scrambled to their feet, angrier. What? You mocking us? Stop dodging and take it like a man. Bell stepped backward exactly 3 paces, and they whiffed again. He moved so casually, so lightly, he looked more like he was strolling through a garden instead of avoiding 3 grown men trying to tackle him. Then he reached the bench, sat down cross-legged, and sighed. Please stop. I'm tired. The three roared in frustration and charged all at once. Bell raised his hand. Tap, tap, tap. 3 motions. Too fast for normal eyes. The criminals froze mid-charge. One stood bent at a 90-degree angle. Another balanced awkwardly on one foot. The third had his arms stuck above his head like he was praising the sun. None of them could move. They could breathe normally. Their eyes darted wildly, but their muscles were locked in place. MF. GHHKK. MMMM. Bell rubbed his temple. I just paralyzed your pressure points. Please calm down. I really don't want to make things worse. With that, he closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. His breathing slowed. His heartbeat softened. His aura, wild from battle, gradually settled, harmonizing with the rhythm of his breaths. Warmth flowed through his limbs. The internal injuries from his fight, the bruising, the strain, the backlash of his own technique slowly began to knit together. The cracked cobblestones, the screams, the demon, the arrests. All of it faded into a distant hum. Inside the iron cell of I Am Ganesha, surrounded by frozen criminals, Bell meditated, silent, serene, a young swordsman healing his wounds, completely unaware of how deeply the city had already begun to whisper his name.
Like and subscribe for more Danmachi fanfiction.
Chapter 3, Sucker Punch. Since the incident at the Market District, the destruction, the bloodshed, the lives lost, Bell Cranel had become the center of every whisper in Oreo. A mass killing spree. A mysterious swordsman. A boy holding a demon's severed horn. Rumors spread like wildfire. The Ganesha Familia, working alongside guild officials, had spent the last hours stabilizing the area, removing bodies, repairing the cobblestones, dragging shattered stalls aside, and reassuring terrified civilians that the threat was gone. But unease still lingered. Someone had committed mass murder. Someone had leveled a marketplace. Someone had slain a creature resembling a demon. And as far as the public knew, that someone was Bell Cranel. Inside the Ganesha Familia war chamber, Captain Shakti Varma sat alone at her desk, the dim lantern light reflecting off her crimson armor. Her short, blue pixie-cut hair was combed to the side neatly, but exhaustion had settled around her golden eyes. Before her lay dozens of parchment statements, diagrams, casualty lists, magical residue reports, guild documents, and the most recent additions. Ina Tool's written interview with Bell Cranel. Shakti leaned back, rubbing her forehead. This doesn't add up. The documents painted a troubling picture. 3 surviving adventurers all gave the same statement. The killer was a demon-like old woman. Not the boy. She used a black sword and sword techniques like magic. The boy saved our lives. Yet the only body found was that of the demon disintegrated into nothing, leaving no trace, no ashes, no physical evidence. A convenient hole in the investigation. She remembered her visit to the dungeon cells earlier. Bell was sitting cross-legged on the stone bench, breathing slowly. Calm. Completely unbothered. Meanwhile, the 3 hardened criminals sharing his cell were frozen in bizarre, humiliating poses, unable to move a muscle. Shakti still didn't know how he did that. She exhaled slowly, eyes drifting to the window beside her. Outside, workers and adventurers continued their efforts to restore the market district. Lanterns bobbed as night approached. Something is wrong, she thought. And we're all looking at the wrong suspect. A sudden knock broke her concentration. Come in, she called. The door opened quietly. A tall half-elf stepped inside in a tool, wearing a neat tunic suit, glasses perched delicately across her nose, her brown bob-cut hair swaying softly as she walked. She carried a heavy stack of documents in her arms. Captain Shakti, Ina greeted, bowing lightly. Sorry for barging in unannounced. It's fine. Sit. Ina approached the desk, set the documents down with care, and took the seat opposite the captain. Her expression was grave. We're missing something, she said without preamble. Everyone is scrambling to place blame on Bell Cranel simply because he's new. He entered the city the same day the incident occurred, and because the guild lacks records on him, they're jumping to conclusions. Shakti tapped her armored fingers on the desk. What did your interview reveal? Ina reached into her stack and pulled out a folded letter. This. She placed it on Shakti's desk. The boy claims he came to Oreo to meet someone named Kusanagi-hime. This letter supposedly came from her. Shakti raised a brow and opened the letter carefully. The wording was elegant. The ink was divine. The magical signature faint but unmistakable. It was authentic. He's telling the truth, Shakti muttered. And there's more, Ina said. She withdrew a small wooden plaque, aged yet pristine, engraved with golden ink, that shimmered faintly even in low light. The moment Shakti saw it, her eyes widened, her breath caught. This is the official identification plaque of the School of the Sword God, Aina confirmed. Shakti stared at her. Sword God, as in the legendary swordsman who split Broken Sword Mountain? That Sword God. Exactly. Shakti nearly dropped the plaque. A connection to the Sword God meant one thing. Bell wasn't a random traveler. He wasn't an unstable killer. He wasn't even an ordinary swordsman. He was a disciple of a myth. Aina watched Shakti's shock with a knowing expression. I don't believe Bell Cranel was the perpetrator, Aina said firmly. Something else was responsible. And if we don't handle this properly, the city will blame an innocent child. Shakti set the plaque down slowly, her face growing serious. This changes everything. The storm around Bell Cranel was only beginning. Bell had long since recovered from his wounds, but he remained seated cross-legged in the silent iron cage. His breathing was steady, deep, precise, each inhale drawing in the ambient mana, each exhale refining the red glow flickering faintly around his body. The three criminal adventurers still stood frozen in their ridiculous poses, unable to speak or move, only their eyes trembling in panic. They didn't understand what was happening. They couldn't see the aura erupting from Bell, an internal flame swirling around his form like a sleeping volcano. Bell focused inward. His mana core, faintly red, pulsed in rhythm with his breath. Too light, he thought. Not yet stable enough. I need to find Heimsama. I need answers. Why had she summoned him here? What was she planning? Why now, after all these years? His concentration deepened. When clang, clang, clang echoed through the corridor, a Ganesha guard approached the cage. You there, Bell Cranel? Captain Shakti and the guild request your presence in the war chamber. Bell exhaled softly, ending his meditation. He rose gracefully, every movement fluid and deliberate. Before leaving, he tapped each of the three criminals lightly on the shoulder. Thud. All three collapsed onto the stone floor gasping, drenched in sweat, muscles finally freed. Bell bowed politely to the trembling criminals, then followed the guard. Training grounds, Ganesha Familia Fortress. Bell waited outside Captain Shakti's war chamber, escorted by two guards. While standing there, he noticed the Ganesha adventurers training in the courtyard. And immediately, he frowned. Their footwork was sloppy. Their swings were wide and unrefined. Their stances left their balance exposed. They wasted energy on every movement. Bell raised a brow. If Heimsama saw this, she'd faint. He said nothing, but the flaw in every strike irritated him like a splinter under the skin. That was when three guild representatives arrived, middle-aged men, wearing ornate uniforms and arrogant expressions. They spotted Bell instantly. There he is, one sneered. The child murderer. A disgrace to Orio. No remorse, no shame. Bell didn't even turn to look at them. He simply sighed long, tired, and uninterested. That enraged them. You dare ignore us? One guild officer suddenly grinned maliciously and, without warning, kicked Bell with all his strength. Bell's body reacted before his mind did. His instinct snapped awake, and he raised his arm, blocking the kick. But the force still sent him skidding backward into the training grounds, boots carving deep tracks into the sandy arena floor. He landed on one knee, sliding but stable. A follow-up attack came instantly. The officer appeared in front of him faster than Bell expected for a bureaucrat and launched a full-force straight punch. Bell blocked with both arms. Crack! The impact rattled his bones and hurled him across the arena. He crashed into a stone pillar, the shock shuddering through his spine. The other two officers burst into laughter. Ha ha! So this is the monster who killed people. Pathetic. He only preys on civilians. Bell pushed himself to his feet, arm throbbing, dust falling from his kimono. He looked up slowly, expression unreadable. The crowd of Ganesha adventurers training nearby had stopped, their eyes widening, disbelief spreading. Why were guild officers attacking a restrained suspect? Why were they provoking him? Why was the boy still standing? Bell exhaled, steadying his breath. I didn't come here to fight humans. But if they kept attacking him, this would not end quietly. And somewhere inside the war chamber, Shakti Verma paused mid-sentence as the distant boom of the impact echoed through her walls, her eyes narrowing sharply. Something was very, very wrong. The malicious guild representative stepped forward, lips twisting into a cruel smirk as he drew his weapon. It was a broad sword, wide, heavy, and etched with intricate golden patterns that glimmered under the training ground's torchlight. Mana surged violently from his body, erupting like a wildfire. Dust spiraled upward around his feet from the sheer pressure alone. Ganesha adventurers murmured in confusion. A guild official. With this much combat strength? A level 3. Attacking a boy? Bell, meanwhile, stood calmly. He reached into his kimono, fingers finding a familiar red string. With practiced ease, he tied his white hair into a short ponytail, clearing his vision. His expression shifted, gentle softness replaced by razor focus. Then, his aura exploded. A violent flood of energy, red, heavy, and suffocating, swept through the entire training ground. It was not just mana. It was aura, battle instinct, and killing intent, fused together into one overwhelming pressure. Ganesha adventurers staggered back, shielding their eyes. Lieutenants stiffened instinctively. Even the seasoned warriors felt their hearts pound in alarm. But the 3 guild representatives, 2 of them froze where they stood, trembling, unable to breathe properly. The third, the one who sucker-punched Bell, gritted his teeth through the fear, sweat pouring down his face as he forced his body to remain standing. Bell ignored their reactions. His eyes scanned the ground calmly until he spotted a broken wooden beam, the remains of a structure collapse he himself caused. He picked it up, gripping it gently. He swung it once, twice, 3 times, testing weight, testing durability, testing balance. Satisfied, he raised the wooden stick in front of him like a katana. Then he did something none of them expected. Bell bowed to his opponent. A deep, respectful bow, the kind taught by the shrine of the sword god. The kind a swordsman gave before a duel of honor. Gasps broke across the training field. The guild representative Leonard blinked, then burst into mocking laughter. Ptaha! What is this? A child's play? Bowing like some old-fashioned swordsman? You think this is a duel, brat? Bell straightened, face expressionless. Leonard raised his jeweled sword proudly. Fine. If you want names, listen well. I am Leonard, battle master of the guild. Level 3. Remember it before I break every bone in your body. Bell adjusted his stance slightly. Mock me if you wish, he replied quietly. But I honor every opponent, even those who don't deserve it. The field went silent. Leonard's mocking grin twitched, just for a moment. The other guild officers beside him froze, eyes widening at Bell's words. Something in his tone, his posture, his sincerity, it didn't match the accusations against him at all. Around the training grounds, Ganesha adventurers whispered urgently. He bowed. Level 3 or not, that boy is different. That pressure from earlier, was that really a child? What kind of training produces that kind of aura? Higher-ranking lieutenants stood at the edges of the arena, arms crossed, eyes sharp. This wasn't just a scuffle anymore. This was a duel that could reveal the truth. Leonard gripped his broad sword with both hands, mana flaring wildly. Get ready, brat. I'll show you the power of a guild battle master. Bell slowly raised his wooden stick. The wind stilled. The ground trembled faintly under the weight of 2 clashing auras. Ganesha familia soldiers gathered in silent circles, knowing a serious fight was about to unfold. 2 warriors faced one another, one wielding a blessed broadsword, one wielding nothing but a broken wooden stick. Yet somehow, Bell looked like the more dangerous of the 2. The duel was moments away from erupting, and the entire fortress held its breath. Within a single breath, the world exploded into motion. Bell and Leonard vanished from their stances and collided at the center of the sandy arena. Their clash detonated a shockwave that blasted sand outward in a spiraling storm, forming a shallow crater beneath their feet. Bell's wooden stick wrapped in swirling red aura and refined mana met Leonard's golden-patterned broadsword head-on. Clong! The impact shook the air. Leonard's eyes widened in disbelief. He's blocking my sword? With wood. The red aura enveloping Bell's improvised weapon thickened, crackling like embers fanned by divine wind. His arms were steady, his posture unshakable, his breathing rhythmic. Leonard snarled and released more mana. His brown hair lifted upward as though caught in a vortex. His armor rattled from the eruption of pressure. Sand slid away from his feet in ripples as his power repelled the ground itself. Bell's heels dug into the crater as the force pushed him back. But then, in less than a heartbeat, Bell vanished. Leonard's pupils shrank. Fast, he spun on instinct, swinging his sword backward in a defensive arc. Clang! Bell reappeared behind him, wooden blade meeting Leonard's steel with such force that Leonard's feet dug deep into the sand, sinking several inches. The Ganesha adventurers watching gasped at the sight. Leonard growled, muscles bulging, and shifted. Bell moved again. FWIP. Gone. Leonard twisted, swinging in a wide diagonal arc. But Bell wasn't there. Then Leonard sensed it, a faint disturbance of air above. He swung upward. Bell wasn't there either. Above? No, behind. He pivoted, slashing low. only to find Bell standing calmly 3 steps away, hands on the wooden stick as if he'd never moved at all. A faint smirk tugged at Bell's lips. "You're swinging too wide," he said lightly. "Your movements are sloppy. You need more practice." The arena fell silent. The Ganesha adventurers stared, speechless. Leonard froze. Then his face contorted with rage. "Why, you little—" His mana flared again, even more explosive than before. The sand around him lifted in a swirling storm, and cracks formed beneath his feet. He dashed forward, sword carving arcs through the air, vertical slashes, horizontal sweeps, thrusts meant to impale. Bell didn't even raise his stick. He walked around the attacks. A slight turn here, a half step there, a tilt of the head, a shift of the shoulders. Each minimal movement effortlessly avoided Leonard's onslaught. The guild battle master's slashes tore violent scars into the ground, slicing open the training field, kicking up clouds of dust. But Bell remained untouched. Untouched and calm. "This is why you lose your balance," Bell commented softly. "Your hips are too open. Your swings are too emotional. You waste strength. You telegraph everything." Leonard let out a furious roar. "Shut up." He thrust forward with a strike meant to break stone. Bell sidestepped. Leonard's eyes widened in horror. His own forward momentum betrayed him. He crashed directly into the same stone pillar that Bell had been smashed into earlier. Boom! The pillar cracked from the force, rubble raining down around the humiliated officer as he slid to the ground in a coughing heap. Dust settled over the arena. Bell lowered his wooden stick. Ganesha adventurers stared at him with awe. Lieutenants exchanged glances, unsure whether they had just witnessed a duel or a lesson, because the truth was painfully clear. Bell Cranel had toyed with a level 3 battlemaster, and he hadn't even used his sword. When the dust finally settled, Leonard staggered upright, his breath ragged, his body drenched in sweat. His once pristine guild uniform hung in tatters, ripped open across the chest and shoulders, revealing a tightly fitted chainmail mesh underneath. Blood trickled from his lip. His hair clung to his face. His pride, more than anything, had been wounded. He glared at Bell with burning, humiliated fury. Then, foom! Leonard released everything. Mana exploded from his body in a massive wave, trembling through the entire training ground. The air thickened with his killing intent. The sand around him vibrated violently, swirling into miniature cyclones before being blasted away. His muscles swelled, grotesquely bulging, tightening, straining against his armor until cracks formed along the metal plates. The Ganesha adventurers gasped and backed away. Leonard is serious. He's boosting his body to the limit. That stance. He's using the guild's forbidden physical enhancement art. Bell watched quietly, wooden stick hanging loosely at his side. He sighed. A long, weary sigh. "You shouldn't do that," Bell said. "More muscles won't help you in this duel." Leonard growled like a cornered beast. Bell continued, tone calm but cutting. "More muscle means more power, but it also means less control. Without precision and flexibility, you're just wasting energy." Several Ganesha adventurers blinked in shock. He's lecturing a level 3 battlemaster? But Leonard only grew more furious. "Shut your mouth, brat. Shiki, Akari, get over here." The 2 other guild reps who had been watching with smug amusement straightened immediately. Shiki, a burly man with wild black hair and thick arms, reached behind him and drew a massive 2-handed sledgehammer, the metal head easily weighing more than Bell himself. Sparks flew when he slammed it into the ground as he took position. He moved to Bell's right, 12 feet away, stance wide, hammer raised. Akari, the second man, looked leaner but far deadlier. He drew twin axes, each sharpened to a vicious edge and glowing faintly with enchantments. He took position behind Bell, 12 feet away, eyes cold, expression deadly serious. Then, boom! Both men released their mana. Shiki's aura crushed downward like a falling mountain, blowing sand outward in a spiraling wave. His muscles bulged as if ready to tear through his skin, veins throbbing violently. Akari's aura flared like a wildfire, hot, sharp, and slicing through the air. The twin axes vibrated in his grip, thirsting for blood. The ground beneath his feet cracked, forming a shallow crater. 3 level 3 guild officers. Fully buffed, fully enraged, facing a single boy holding a stick. The entire Ganesha Familia training ground went silent. Even the lieutenants battle-hardened, experienced warriors stopped speaking. Bell stood alone at the center of a triangle of killing intent. He looked at each man in turn. Then he sighed again. "You 3 don't really listen, do you?" The statement struck deeper than any blade. Leonard's face twisted with outrage. Shiki clenched his hammer with white knuckles. Akari bared his teeth in fury. You brat. I'll crush you into the floor. I'll tear you apart. Bell simply shook his head, tightening his grip on the wooden stick. Their mana flared. Their killing intent erupted. The sand rose in swirling storms. And Bell, calm, quiet, almost bored, stood ready. The entire fortress held its breath. Because everyone from lieutenants to raw recruits understood one terrifying truth. 3 level 3s were about to attack a single unarmed boy. And somehow, it felt like the 3 of them were the ones in danger.
Like and subscribe for more Danmachi fanfiction.
Chapter 4, Sword God Successor. Minutes earlier, Shakti Varma and Inatul had rushed toward the source of the commotion, following the rumbling noises shaking the lower floors of the fortress. They emerged onto a second-floor corridor overlooking the entire training ground and elevated walkway with iron railings where officers normally observed drills. But what they saw below was no drill. Bell Cranel stood in the center of the arena with nothing but a wooden stick, facing off against Leonard, a fully armed guild representative. Ina's eyes widened. That's Leonard, the level 3, infamous in the guild as the battle master. Shakti's jaw clenched, anger boiling beneath her composed exterior. What is that idiot doing attacking a suspect inside my fortress? Below them, Leonard's sword crashed against Bell's stick, sending shockwaves across the arena. Ina leaned forward, gripping the railing with trembling hands. Leonard is known to be hot-headed. He doesn't tolerate disrespect, and he always fights until he wins. But the longer they watched, the more the situation shifted. Leonard's face twisted with frustration. Bell's expression remained calm. Leonard's swings became desperate. Bell avoided them with casual grace, offering critiques like a teacher correcting a poorly performing student. Shakti couldn't believe her eyes. Ina, she said slowly, what level is Bell Cranel? Ina swallowed, pushing her glasses nervously up her nose. In the guild records, he is listed as either a level 1 or an unconfirmed level 2. His Falna appraisal was scheduled today, but the inspector hasn't arrived yet. Shakti turned sharply toward her. A level 1 is toying with a level 3 battle master. Are you telling me that child is fighting without Falna verification? Ina nodded, equally stunned. Shakti's mind raced. If Bell defeated Leonard publicly, the guild might double down on their accusations. If Leonard was humiliated, a political fallout could be disastrous. And more importantly, if Bell was killed or badly injured, the truth behind the Market District attack might never be uncovered. Shakti stepped forward. I have to stop the fight. But a firm hand landed on her shoulder, halting her. She froze. Wait, Shakti Verma. She turned and her eyes widened. Standing behind her was Ganesha, her god, towering and imposing even in his flamboyant white and gold armor. His mask hid his expression, but his presence alone filled the corridor with divine weight. Behind him stood a man in a pristine blue and white guild uniform, golden hair gleaming, golden eyes sharp like a seasoned predator. A sword hung at his waist, a simple, unadorned weapon, but one that radiated overwhelming mastery. Gaos Elverin, the sword saint of Oreo, a level 6 monster in human skin, and one of the guild's highest-ranking enforcers. Ina nearly choked when she saw him. Gaos. What is he doing here? Gaos folded his arms, gaze fixed on Bell. Observe, he said calmly. A child like this does not appear often. Let us see what the boy is capable of. Shakti stammered. But, my lord Ganesha, this is dangerous. Dangerous? Ganesha echoed in his booming, theatrical voice. To whom? Another explosion rocked the arena as Leonard attempted a mana-fueled strike only to be effortlessly countered and flung aside. Ina gasped loudly, gripping the railing. Her breath caught when she saw 2 more figures jumping into position around Bell. Shiki with his massive hammer. Akari with his twin axes. Oh no, Ina whispered. Not Shiki and Akari. They're both level 3 as well. Shakti's heart skipped a beat. All 3 of them are joining the fight. That's not a duel, that's an execution. The arena trembled again from the combined mana pressure. Sand rose in whirlwinds. Cracks spiderwebbed across the training ground floor. Ganesha Familia adventurers scrambled back from the sheer force. Ina clenched her fists. Bell is in danger. Serious danger. But Gaos continued watching calmly from the shadows of the corridor, golden eyes sharp, almost hungry. Danger, he murmured. Perhaps. But tell me, Inatul. He pointed a gloved finger at the boy below as Bell took a quiet breath and shifted his stance. Why does the child not look afraid? Below them, Bell sighed and said, You 3 really don't listen. The training ground fell silent. And then the real battle began. Leonard moved first. With a roar, he lunged at Bell, his mana bursting outward like a shockwave. Shiki and Akari followed in perfect synchronization, 3 level 3 elites, striking with full intent to overwhelm and crush. Boom! Their combined impact smashed into the spot where Bell stood a heartbeat earlier. Sand exploded upward in a towering cloud. The entire training ground trembled as if struck by an earthquake. A wall of air blasted outward, forcing nearby adventurers to brace themselves. Cracks spiderwebbed across the arena floor. Ganesha Familia soldiers gasped. Ichi got crushed. No one could survive that. So the kid wasn't a genius after all. Ina's hands flew to her mouth, trembling. Bell. Shakti gritted her teeth. This is unacceptable. They'll kill him before we even clear his name. But beside them, Lord Ganesha and Gaos remained strangely calm. Ganesha crossed his massive arms, invisible smile beneath his mask. Gaos's golden eyes narrowed with amusement. They missed, he said quietly. The dust settled. Bell was nowhere on the ground. Gasps burst across the second-floor corridor. Bell was suspended 100 meters in the air. He hovered for only a heartbeat. But that heartbeat was enough for every trained warrior present to feel a chill run down their spine. Red aura blazed around him, spiraling like a living flame. His wooden stick still held in its sheathed position glowed faintly. His stance was poised, perfect, unshakable. The boy jumped. No, he launched himself upward from their attack. Impossible. He's preparing a sword-drawing technique. Leonard, Akari, and Shiki all sensed the incoming danger. Their bodies tensed. Their mana flared. Their killing intent spiked. Aerial technique. Akari shouted. He's coming down on us? Shiki barked. Leonard roared. Bring it, brat. Gravity took hold. Bell fell like a meteor, wind screaming around him, blades still sheathed. Energy focusing to a single point. The 3 guild representatives leapt upward to meet him midair, weapons raised, mana erupting. The collision was cataclysmic. In that instant, Bell drew. Sheeing. The wooden sword in Bell's hand split, multiplying into 3 crimson blades of pure aura, each one matching the angle and approach of the 3 opponents. What? Impossible. Ichi copied. Shiki's sledgehammer met the first blade. It shattered instantly. Shiki's arms went limp as he was blasted away. Akari's twin axes crossed defensively. Bell's second blade sliced through them like water. The shock hit Akari's nerves, shutting his consciousness down before he even landed. Leonard met Bell head-on. Steel against wood. Battle master against prodigy. There was a single spark. Leonard's eyes rolled back. He collapsed midair. His sword flew from his hand as his body plummeted. Bell, already descending, finished the arc of his slash. He hit the ground with one knee bent, body still in his drawn blade posture, red aura flickering like embers around him. His wooden sword splintered, then crumbled to dust. Bell whispered softly. Sword god style. New form. Liquid edge severance. Behind him. Thud, thud, thud. Leonard, Shiki, and Akari all landed at different spots in the arena. Each one unconscious. Each one defeated in a single, precise instant. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, I am Ganesha. Lord Ganesha flexed wildly, muscles bulging until his clothes tore, striking a glorious pose of divine pride. Adventurers flinched. Ina nearly fainted in relief, tears streaking down her face. I thought he died, but it was only a second. A split second. Shakti stared down in awe. A child, a genius of this caliber, alone defeated 3 level 3s. Her voice trembled. What is he? Beside her, Gaos smirked, arms folded. He copied them, he said. Shakti blinked. Copied. Gaos nodded. That child saw Leonard's, Akari's, and Shiki's movements once and reproduced their combined techniques with perfect efficiency. He chuckled softly. A frightening talent. Something seen only in legends. His golden eyes glimmered. The world truly is vast, and it seems Oreo has gained a monster of its own. He leaned forward slightly. No, a sword god's successor. Below them, Bell rose slowly, breathing steady, eyes calm. But everyone watching, every adventurer, soldier, captain, and god, felt the same terrible truth. Bell Cranel had just changed the balance of Oreo. Several days passed, and the dust of the chaos finally began to settle. Thanks to the combined efforts of Shakti Verma and Ina Tool, Bell Cranel's name was successfully cleared. The testimonies of the 3 surviving adventurers who all swore that a demonic old woman caused the massacre became the cornerstone of Bell's acquittal. But that alone wasn't enough. The guild had already branded Bell a dangerous suspect. Removing that stain required more than paperwork. It required power. And power arrived in the form of Gaos Elverin, the Sword Saint. With his quiet but overwhelming influence, he ensured the guild's investigation shifted in Bell's favor. Documents were expedited, testimonies prioritized, and the political heat diffused. When Lord Ganesha himself stepped forward as a direct witness confirming Bell's innocence and praising his restraint during the duel, the guild admins had no choice but to comply. No one dared question Ganesha, the deity who commanded Aurario's army, its public order, its protection. His political weight was immense. Within 3 days, Bell Cranel was officially pardoned. But something unexpected happened. Bell Cranel became famous. Word spread across Aurario like wildfire. A boy no more than 14 or 15 defeated 3 level 3 guild representatives with a wooden stick, and a technique none had ever seen before. Even the elite of Aurario were shaken. Otter, the strongest level 7 alive, reportedly raised an eyebrow, the greatest sign of interest anyone ever got from him. Alan Fromel, captain of Freya Familia's killers, muttered under his breath that the boy might become troublesome. Bars and taverns buzzed with gossip. Who is Bell Cranel? They say he's a prodigy from outside Aurario. He fought like a trained sword saint. Maybe he's secretly from Zeus Familia? No, I heard he's a reincarnation of the sword god. Nonsense. Probably just guild propaganda. Some adventurers worshipped him. Some envied him. Some outright refused to believe the rumors. But the story kept growing. At the hostess of fertility, Seer nearly dropped a plate when she overheard a group of adventurers whispering Bell's name. Anya practically pounced on Seer, shouting, "NY, our Belly is famous." Chloe eavesdropped shamelessly and smirked. Ryu quietly paused her wiping of tables, a faint hint of surprise in her normally stoic eyes. The boy they fed a simple meal days ago was now one of Aurario's rising stars. Seer cupped her cheek dreamily. He said he was looking for someone. I hope he's all right. Ryu frowned slightly, but said nothing. Even she couldn't deny Bell's talent. Elsewhere, tension rose. In the Loki Familia conference room, Loki herself kicked her feet up on the table, grinning like a fox who'd found a new toy. So there's a new hotshot running around Aurario, huh? A brat who defeated 3 level 3s. Loki drawled. Findame, the captain, nodded while reading the reports. The data is incomplete. His fauna hasn't been evaluated publicly, but his combat capabilities are far beyond a typical level 1. Riveria crossed her arms, emerald eyes narrowing. Defeating 3 trained guild officers with a broken weapon? That isn't talent, that's abnormal. Bet scoffed loudly. TCH. Another wannabe prodigy. Bet he's all hype. Ace, silent until now, raised her head slightly. Bell Cranel, she whispered. Loki sat up sharply. Oh, Ace Tan interested. Ace didn't answer. She remembered the quiet boy she had crossed paths with only briefly. The way he bowed polite, steady, almost old-fashioned, caught her attention more than she expected. His stance lingered in her mind. Disciplined, grounded, refined in a way that reminded her of the earliest lessons she received. Yet strangely different, as if shaped by a school she had never seen before. And the way he moved clean, efficient, impossibly fluid did not match any style she recognized. Ace found herself wondering, who trained him? Where did he learn that? How much stronger can he become? It wasn't admiration. It was curiosity, quiet, sharp, and growing. I want to spar with him, Ace admitted softly. Loki burst into mischievous laughter. Finn, give me everything on this Bell Cranel kid. We're recruiting him. I want that genius in Loki Familia. Finn sighed but nodded. I'll gather information immediately. And so, Bell Cranel, who arrived in Aurario quietly and without expectations. A boy searching for his goddess. A boy with a katana. A boy who came from a forgotten shrine in the north. Became the talk of the entire city. A prodigy. A swordsman. A rising star. And Aurario had no idea that this was only the beginning. Bell Cranel officially registered as an adventurer, but his fauna caused an uproar the moment the guild attempted to record it. No matter what tool they used, no matter how many appraisal crystals or divine detection scrolls they brought out, Bell's fauna remained sealed, locked behind an intricate divine barrier. Even the guild's high-grade fauna revealing tablets, the kind normally used for criminals and unregistered gods, failed to show anything. The guild admins exchanged nervous looks. Only a god can hide a fauna like this. But who? No deity has claimed him. This is beyond our authority. In the end, they had no choice but to label Bell as an unknown-level adventurer, tentatively placed somewhere between level 3 to level 5 based purely on observed combat but simultaneously listed as a beginner due to his total lack of dungeon knowledge. That contradiction alone made Bell a topic of intrigue across the guild. Inatul, responsible, diligent, and already exhausted from Bell's recent chaos, was assigned as Bell's guild manager. Her job: monitor him, guide him, and ensure he didn't accidentally destroy half the city again. She gave him a thick folder of familia recommendations. Bell, joining a familia will make dungeon life safer. You'll have support, supplies. Bell shook his head gently. I appreciate it, but I'm looking for someone. Kusanagi Heim. Ina blinked. The name stirred something in her memory, faint, elusive, but refused to come clearly. I think I've heard that name before, but I can't recall where, she murmured. Still, her professionalism kicked in. For now, Bell, you'll need to accept a beginner mission. Bell tilted his head. Hey, mission. Ina handed him a sealed scroll, a notebook, and several blank monster record sheets. Guild mission, beginner field study assignment. Floors, 1st to 5th type. Guild beginner commission, low risk requirements. Minimum 3 to 4 party members. Objective 1. Record and sketch at least 4 monster types. Note: movement, aggression, attack patterns, habitat zones, and monster behavior toward adventurers. Objective 2. Collect 30 to 40 magic stones. Objective 3. Eliminate at least 50 monsters. Objective 4. Research fauna and flora within the dungeon. Note any dangers or useful plants. Bell raised a brow, expression confused. This is how quests are given to new adventurers. Ina nodded firmly. Yes. It teaches teamwork and dungeon knowledge. Even if you can defeat monsters alone, the dungeon environment itself is deadly. She stepped close and tapped the list with her finger. You cannot fight poison. You cannot fight exhaustion. You need clean water, navigation skills, and field notes. The dungeon is not just monsters, it's a living world with hazards. Bell blinked in growing awe. He knew swordsmanship, breathing techniques, kata forms, but this was a different battleground entirely. He accepted all the materials with a respectful bow and attached them to his belt and pack. As he stepped out of the guild hall, Ina raised her voice. Good luck, Bell, and be careful. He waved back brightly. Bell heads for the blacksmith district. Bell jogged through the streets toward Welf Kratzo's smithy. When he arrived, the red-haired blacksmith looked up from his forge and grinned. Hey, Bell. Perfect timing. Your order's done. Welf presented. A freshly forged katana. 2 finely balanced dagger blades. Reinforced metal boots. Sturdy greaves. Protective gauntlets. Bell's eyes widened. Welf-san. This is too much. Nah. Welf laughed, waving him off. Think of it as an investment. A craftsman needs strong adventurers to show off his work. But when Welf noticed the full equipment Bell was purchasing, he frowned. Going dungeon diving already? Bell nodded. Yes. The guild gave me a mission. That was all he needed to say. Welf grabbed his own pack, tools, and a massive greatsword. I'm coming with you. Bell blinked. But what about the shop? Welf slapped his chest proudly. Don't worry about it. I need to raise my level and my blacksmith skill. The dungeon is the best place to test new weapons. He also snatched Bell's mission scroll and read it. Easy stuff. Let's find 2 more members and get started. At the dungeon entrance, the area was packed. Adventurers clamored to form parties, supporters advertised their services, and small vendors sold potions and rations. When Welf and Bell announced they were taking party members, a wave of supporters rushed over hoping to be part of the Rising Prodigies team. But Bell's attention was drawn elsewhere. Among the crowd stood a tiny, hooded Palom girl struggling under a comically large backpack. Despite being small, she stood her ground firmly. Wolf nudged Bell. She looks determined. Bell nodded, approaching her. We're forming a party for a field study mission. Would you like to join us? The small hooded Palom girl turned slowly, lifting her head just enough for her eyes to meet theirs. Lilaruka Arde. Quiet, clever, and far more important than she seemed. If the pay is fair, she said softly, gripping her backpack straps. Bell smiled warmly. Then please join us. And just like that, a prodigy swordsman, a cursed blacksmith, and a thieving Palom supporter formed an unlikely trio and stepped into the dungeon together.
Like and subscribe for more Danmachi fanfiction.
Chapter 5. First Dungeon Dive. The dungeon was not merely a cavern of monsters. It was the living, pulsing heart that shaped the fate of Oreo. Long before the gods descended, long before kingdoms carved borders or men named their empires, the dungeon had already been there, an unfathomable abyss carved into the earth, endless in depth, unknowable in nature. It spawned monsters without end, its floors shifting like the breathing of some ancient, slumbering titan. No scholar has ever reached its bottom. No sage has ever deciphered the will guiding its evolution. When the gods descended and saw it, they declared Aurorio's location sacred, not for temples or devotion, but because the dungeon offered something no other land could match. Infinite resources. Magic stones harvested from slain monsters fueled lamps, powered forges, and became the foundation of modern magical engineering. Rare monster drops fangs, hides, ores, bones-fed industries, workshops, enchantments, and trade routes. From the dungeon flowed wealth, fuel, weapons, food substitutes, even medicine. It was an inexhaustible vein of prosperity. And so, Oreo grew from a barren fortress town into the beating economic center of the continent. Merchants flocked to its gates. Nations formed treaties for access. Smiths, alchemists, and mages established their guilds there. Every familia strove for territory within the dungeon, for fortune and glory alike. The dungeon was danger, wealth, mystery, and lifeblood. It was the wellspring of Aurorio's existence, and the reason the city thrived above all others. As Belle, Wealth, and Lily crossed through the stone archway of the dungeon's entrance, the world around them shifted as though they had stepped into the lungs of another being. The air grew cooler, denser. Sound dulled, light dimmed, and then the scenery blossomed into something entirely foreign. A vast cavern stretched before them, its walls pulsing faintly with life. Glowing blue and green stones were embedded deep within the rocky surfaces, casting an ethereal luminescence that danced across the floor. Belle's breath hitched. It was nothing like the forests or mountains of the north. This place felt alive, like a quiet ecosystem hidden beneath the earth, untouched by the surface world. Moisture glistened across stone pillars that rose like fossilized trees. Strange mosses clung to cracks, softly shimmering with bioluminescent hues. The air carried a faint mineral scent, mingled with something else, something that whispered danger. Belle stepped forward, his eyes wide in wonder. "It's beautiful," he breathed. Wolf gave a low whistle. "Beautiful, yeah? But don't let it fool you. Monsters can pop out anywhere." Lily tugged her oversized backpack forward. "Master Belle, stay alert. The dungeon looks calm, but it's always hungry." Belle nodded, tightening his grip on his katana. The dungeon's first breath had welcomed him. Now it waited. Belle, Wealth, and Lily continued deeper into the dungeon's first floor, their footsteps echoing softly through the stone corridors. The passageways branched and curved like a labyrinth of ancient veins, each forked tunnel leading into shadows that hinted at the unknown. Belle paused at every intersection, unfolding his map and narrowing his eyes as he matched the lines on parchment to the cavern pathways around them. Lily peeked over his shoulder, tilting her small palm head. "Master Belle, is this truly your first dungeon dive?" Belle nodded without looking up. "Yes." She blinked, stunned. "That explains why Miss Ina gave us such basic assignments then. I was starting to wonder." Wolf let out a short laugh. "So the prodigy is a total beginner at dungeon crawling, huh?" Belle finally looked up, confused. "Prodigy?" Before he could press further, Lily leaned closer, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "Well, you are the newest gossip of Oreo, Master Belle. I heard you defeated 3 level 3 guild enforcers in single combat." That made Wolf stop walking entirely. "Wait, that Belle Cranel? The one who wiped the training yard with the guild's elite?" He stared at Belle like he'd grown another head. "I thought that story was exaggerated. You actually did that?" Belle raised a hand dismissively as he studied the next corridor. "It wasn't that big a deal. It was just a spar. And the 3 of them weren't serious, they were holding back." Both Lily and Wealth exchanged looks of disbelief. "Master Belle," Lily muttered, "if they were holding back, then the dungeon must truly be blessed to have you walking inside it." Wolf snorted. "Man, you're so humble it hurts. Most guys would brag for weeks after beating 1 level 3. Belle simply shrugged. "They weren't serious," he repeated, as if the matter was settled. He traced the map with his finger. "The river should be this way. Floor 1 has a cluster of rare mosses, and that's one of our objectives." Right. Welf hoisted his sword over his shoulder. "Let's go before something spawns behind us." As they proceeded down the narrow tunnel that sloped gently downward, the distant sound of trickling water confirmed they were on the right path. Belle's eyes quietly scanned every shadow, every shift of the dungeon walls, absorbing details with the sharpness of someone who had trained for battle, but had never yet experienced the living rhythm of the dungeon itself. The first dive had only just begun. When they reached the end of the corridor, The cramped stone passage suddenly widened into a breathtaking cavern chamber. The three of them stopped in awe. The ceiling arched high overhead like the interior of a cathedral, glittering with natural sculptures formed over countless ages. Stalactites dripped down like frozen spears. Stalagmites rose from the ground in jagged rows. Thin, twisted helictites curled like stone vines, defying gravity as they spiraled outward. Sheets of flowstone cascaded across the walls like mineral waterfalls, shimmering faintly in the light of embedded crystals. And scattered across the ground were small, smooth cave pearls, perfect spheres formed by the dungeon's steady drip of mineral-rich water. Bell stared wide-eyed. Amazing. I've never seen anything like this. His voice echoed softly in the chamber. Wolf's grin spread ear to ear. This is why I love the dungeon. Look at these natural veins. He knelt to inspect a cluster of ores embedded in the wall, tapping them with a small hammer. High purity, excellent grain, and these crystals forge Father's anvil. These are worth a fortune. He immediately began gathering minerals with the eager excitement of a child in a candy store. Lily slipped off her oversized backpack and opened her sketchbook. If we record the deposits accurately, the guild will pay extra. Her pencil scratched quickly across the page as she captured the cavern's layout, noting each unique formation, mineral cluster, and flora growth. Despite her small frame, her hands moved with practiced grace, a supporter who had mapped many floors. Bell knelt beside a patch of glowing moss growing along a stone ridge. His eyes ran over the pages of the field guide Ina had given him, comparing illustrations and descriptions. This moss, luminescent type, non-toxic, absorbs mana efficiently. He gently touched its surface. It pulsed faintly beneath his fingers. The flora here was unlike anything he had known outside the city, plants shaped by mana, stone, and the dungeon's mysterious energy. Each specimen felt alien, yet alive in a way the surface world never prepared him for. Welf called over. Bell? Careful touching the plants. Some spit acid. Or explode. Bell blinked. Explode. Welcome to the dungeon, Welf said proudly. Bell chuckled softly, closing the book. I see why Ina insisted on research first. Under the chamber's glowing lights, the three continued their work, Welf mining, Lily sketching, and Bell studying, each discovering in their own way that the dungeon was more than just a place of battle. It was a world of wonders. Bell collected several samples of the glowing moss, carefully plucking each piece with precision. He placed them gently inside a small, wooden box carved with swirling sword patterns, the box itself a memento from the shrine. Once the samples were secured, he slid the container into his sack and tied it tightly. All right, Bell said softly. Let's keep moving. They proceeded through another cavern tunnel, stepping over uneven stone as the distant drip of water echoed through the passage. But the moment they entered a wider chamber, a cluster of goblins burst from the shadows, eyes glowing, claws raised, snarling with hunger. In a single breath, they vanished. Ash scattered into the air like dust blown from a candle flame. Lily froze mid-step, her jaw dropping. Welf blinked so hard his eyelids practically clicked. What? Just happened? Lily whispered, trembling. I didn't even see you move, Welf muttered. They were there, and then, poof, God's sake. Bell. Bell slid his katana back into its sheath as if swatting flies was all he had done. Oh, sorry. Instinct. Instinct. Lily sputtered. Master Bell, if you destroy the monsters instantly, how are we supposed to study them? We need sketches, patterns, observations. You can't just vaporize them. Bell paused, then scratched the back of his head, laughing sheepishly. Right. I forgot. Lily sighed so hard she deflated slightly. Wolf laughed under his breath. Man, you're going to give the guild a heart attack. With the monsters gone, they continued downward until the path sloped into a narrow stair of carved stone. After a few minutes, the air grew cooler, thicker. The walls tightened around them, and the glowstones embedded in the stone dimmed, casting longer shadows that danced with every step. Floor 2. The corridor here felt different, more oppressive, more alive. The breathing of the dungeon seemed louder, as though the walls themselves were listening. Light's still good, Wolf whispered, lifting his lantern. But watch your step. This floor likes to surprise people. Bell nodded. Understood. Instead of charging into the next group of monsters, Bell led them toward a slightly elevated ridge overlooking a small clearing. A pair of kobolds stalked below, growling at each other as they fought over a cracked magic stone. Bell lowered himself into a crouch. Let's observe from here. Lily puffed her chest proudly. Good. Very good. This is proper field study behavior. Wolf smirked. Yeah, no ash explosions this time. Bell ignored the teasing as he focused his breathing. His eyes sharpened. The kobold's movements slowed in his vision not because of any supernatural technique, but because his honed training made every shift of weight, every twitch, every intent clear to him. Kobold behavior, Bell whispered, is more aggressive than goblins. They circle first, then pounce. Their claws are sharper, too. Lily's pencil skirted across her notebook as she took notes eagerly. Bell remained still, absorbing everything. The monsters, the ecosystem, the rhythm of the dungeon. This time not as a swordsman, but as a student. Lily finished the last strokes of her sketch, her pencil moving with practiced speed as she captured the kobold's hunched frames, clawed hands, and alert postures. She added quick annotations along the margins: pack movement, territorial behavior, increased aggression when guarding resources. When she finally lowered her notebook, she exhaled quietly. All right, I've got enough on their physical traits, she whispered. Bell nodded and gestured subtly toward a lower ridge closer to the kobold's nesting area. The three of them moved with careful precision, stepping only when the monster's attention was elsewhere. Bell led, his movements so light they barely disturbed the dust beneath his sandals. Wolf followed, bulky frame somehow quiet despite the weight of his gear. Lily brought up the rear, every sense tuned for danger. They settled behind a jagged rock formation overlooking the nest. What they saw made all three of them freeze. The kobolds weren't just resting. Scattered across the cavern floor were pieces of adventurer equipment, rusted short swords, cracked shields, torn leather armor, broken helms, even a bent spear shaft. Some were piled together haphazardly, others arranged in crude stacks, as if intentionally sorted. One kobold dragged a battered dagger toward the center of the nest, placing it carefully atop a small mound of metal scraps. They're hoarding, Bell murmured. Lily's eyes widened. Like treasures. One kobold snarled at another when it got too close to a pile, swatting it away possessively before curling around the heap like a dragon guarding gold. Bell leaned closer, studying their behavior. Is this normal? He asked softly. Do dungeon monsters usually collect equipment? Lily shook her head slowly, unease creeping into her expression. No. I've supported a lot of parties. I've seen monsters use dropped weapons out of instinct sometimes, but hoarding like this? This is the first time. Welf scratched his chin, brow furrowed. I've heard stories. Adventurers exaggerating, probably. Monsters copying movements, picking up habits. But this? He glanced back at the nest. It's almost like they're learning. Or remembering. Bell's eyes narrowed slightly. Learning. The word echoed in his mind. He quietly pulled out the guild-issued notebook and recorded the observation, writing carefully and precisely. Kobolds observed hoarding adventurer equipment. Behavior appears territorial and possessive. Possible sign of learned behavior or environmental adaptation. He paused, then added another line. Unconfirmed requires further observation. Bell looked between Welf and Lily. Should I dispose of them now? Both of them hesitated. Welf shifted his weight. From a combat standpoint, easy. They're kobolds. But, he glanced back at the horde. If monsters really are changing, then wiping them out immediately might cost us information. Lily nodded slowly, clutching her notebook. The guild asked for research. If this behavior spreads to other monsters, it could change how adventurers approach the dungeon. Bell remained silent for a moment, watching the kobold squabble over a cracked shield like children fighting over a toy. Then we observe a bit longer, he decided. If they show signs of escalating aggression, we'll act. Both Welf and Lily agreed quietly. The three stayed hidden, the dungeon breathing softly around them, as something unsettling settled in their minds. Monsters weren't supposed to learn, but the dungeon, as always, seemed determined to break expectations. A deep, guttural growl rolled through the cavern, vibrating against stone like a warning drum. Lily stiffened instantly, her ears ringing. Did you hear that? The kobolds below froze mid-motion. Their infighting stopped, heads snapping toward a tunnel at the far end of the chamber. A moment later, heavy footsteps echoed slow, deliberate, far heavier than any kobold Bell had ever seen. Then it emerged. A massive kobold stepped into the light of the cavern, its silhouette grotesquely large. It was hunched but towering, its frame easily rivaling a minotaur in height. Its muscles bulged beneath patchwork armor pieces of adventurer gear stitched together to fit its unnatural size. Breastplates were cracked and bent, leather straps stretched and reinforced, greaves mismatched but functional. And dragged behind it. An adventurer, Welf muttered in disbelief. The large kobold hauled an unconscious man by the ankle, armor scraped and bloodied, his sword missing. The kobolds immediately scurried toward the giant, chittering and bowing their heads, clearing a space as if welcoming a king returning from a hunt. Bel's eyes narrowed. The stitching holding the armor together caught his attention. It wasn't metalwork or leather binding. A glossy, translucent substance coated the seams, thick, stringy, and faintly reflective under the glowstones. Resin, Bell whispered. Or mucus, some kind of organic adhesive. He turned to Welf. Do you know anything about monsters doing this? Welf didn't answer immediately. Bell glanced at him and paused. Welf's usual confidence was gone. His jaw was tight, shoulders tense, eyes locked on the alpha kobold with unease written plainly across his face. No, Welf admitted quietly. I've heard rumors. Monsters picking up weapons, wearing scraps. But this, he shook his head. This is the first time I've actually seen one build something. Below them, the alpha kobold let out a thunderous roar, lifting its head as the smaller kobold screeched in response. It slammed a clawed fist into the cavern floor, asserting dominance. The unconscious adventurer was tossed aside like discarded prey. Lily swallowed hard. That explains everything. Bell looked at her. Explain. Lily adjusted her grip on her notebook, voice low but urgent. Kobolds normally hoard out of instinct shiny things, sharp things. But when there's an alpha like that, she nodded toward the giant. They don't just hoard. They follow. Her eyes trembled slightly. That's not a normal kobold anymore. It's evolved. Fed by combat. Equipment. Mana residue. It's leading them and the others are copying it. Bell watched as one of the smaller kobolds dragged a cracked helmet closer, mimicking the alpha's movements, trying to strap it onto its head. If this continues, Lily said, voice tightening, they'll grow smarter, stronger, organized. Welf clenched his fists. And if that thing keeps capturing adventurers, it'll only get worse. Bell exhaled slowly, mind racing. This wasn't just a nest. It was the beginning of something dangerous. We can't leave this alone, Bell said quietly. If that alpha amasses a larger horde, the first 5 floors won't be safe anymore. Lily nodded firmly. We need to deal with it now before the dungeon turns this into a pattern. Below them, the alpha kobold raised its head again, red eyes scanning the cavern with unsettling awareness. And for just a moment, Bell felt it. The distinct, crawling sensation of being watched. Bell set his sack gently on the cavern floor and stepped forward, his presence sharpening as if a blade had been drawn inside him. He inhaled deeply, filling his lungs to their limit, then exhaled in a slow, measured stream. The chaos of the cavern faded. Sound dulled. The rhythm of the dungeon aligned with his breath. Bell's feet settled into position, knees slightly bent, spine straight, left hand steady at his side, while his right hovered near the hilt of his katana. A perfect ready-to-draw stance, calm, lethal, unwavering. His eyes locked onto the alpha kobold. Sword god style, he murmured, voice barely louder than the hum of the glowstones. Form 1. World-cleaving genesis. He vanished. Stone cracked beneath his foot as Bell lunged forward with terrifying speed, his body turning into a white blur cutting straight through the cavern air. The smaller kobolds shrieked in panic. The alpha reacted instantly. With a guttural roar, it seized one of its kin and hurled the screaming kobold like a living projectile. Bell twisted mid-dash, narrowly evading the flying body, but the forced deviation cost him a fraction of a second. That was enough. The alpha's jaws bulged, and it spat. A glob of translucent mucus shot through the air like a cannonball and struck Bell's right hand, the hand meant to draw his blade. The substance hardened instantly. Bell landed, feet skidding across stone. He ignored the sting and reached for his sword. It wouldn't move. His katana was glued inside its sheath. Bell's eyes flicked downward, recognizing the danger at once. Too late. The alpha kobold straightened, gripping an absurdly large sword stitched, stolen, reforged for its massive frame. It raised the weapon overhead, muscles coiling, shadow swallowing Bell as the blade began its descent.
Like and subscribe for more Danmachi fanfiction.
Chapter 6. The Strength of the Alpha. The dungeon was more than a labyrinth of monsters, it was a new frontier for mankind. The moment one stepped inside, the world changed. Stone breathed with mana. Light grew from crystal veins. Entire ecosystems thrived in places untouched by the sun, governed by laws unlike those of the surface. Plants adapted to darkness, monsters evolved endlessly, and the land itself seemed alive, observing, responding, learning. From this living abyss, civilization advanced. Magic grew sharper and more efficient as mages studied how spells reacted to dungeon environments. New casting theories emerged from observing monster cores and mana flow. Metallurgy leaped forward as ores found only in the dungeon produced weapons lighter, stronger, and capable of holding enchantments no surface metal could endure. Even strategy evolved. Formations, roles, and party dynamics refined through countless life or death encounters underground. Most importantly, the dungeon reshaped the understanding of fauna. Adventurers discovered that fauna did not grow in isolation, it responded to danger, adaptation, and intent. Skills awakened under pressure. Stats bloomed through hardship. The dungeon became the ultimate crucible, forging not only strength, but purpose. Oreo rose because of it. At the center of the world, above the beating heart of the dungeon, humanity learned to push beyond its limits, not by safety, but by challenge. As adventurers grew stronger, as fauna refined itself through hardship and divine observation, the world believed it stood at the peak of evolution. Skills became sharper, magic more efficient. Monsters were cataloged, measured, and classified. The dungeon was treated as a resource dangerous, yes, but predictable. That belief was wrong. Unknown to gods and mortals alike, the dungeon had never been static. It watched, it learned, it adapted, and now Bell was witnessing that truth firsthand. The Alpha Kobold was proof. Towering over its kin, its massive frame stitched together with scavenged armor plates, leather straps, and hardened resin, the creature was no longer a simple monster. It had learned. It had observed adventurers die, retreat, discard weapons, abandon broken gear, and it had repurposed all of it. What once littered the dungeon floor had become its shield, its skin, its weapon. When the Alpha Kobold raised its oversized sword, an amalgamation of rusted great blades, monster bone, and crystal shards fused together by translucent mucus and slammed it into the ground, the cavern screamed. Boom! The impact sent violent shockwaves through the chamber. The stone floor cracked outward like shattered glass, and the ceiling trembled in response. Jagged stalactites broke loose, plummeting down in deadly spears of stone. Bell! Lily screamed. Dust exploded into the air as Bell was struck head-on, his form vanishing beneath the massive blade. The pressure crushed the ground beneath him, flattening stone and earth alike. For a heartbeat, then another, there was no movement. Wolf's blood ran cold. The Alpha Kobold turned away from the impact site, clearly satisfied. Its glowing eyes shifted, locking onto new prey. It pointed one massive talon toward Lily and Welf and released a deep, guttural roar, one filled not with mindless rage, but command. The smaller kobolds answered. They poured out from the surrounding tunnels, shrieking wildly, carrying scavenged weapons, rusted swords, broken spears, dented shields, even jagged tools stolen from fallen adventurers. Some wore fragments of armor strapped crudely to their bodies with the same sticky resin. There, coordinating, Lily whispered in horror. This wasn't a random swarm. This was a pack. Lily snapped out of her shock and raised her crossbow, hands steady despite her racing heart. Welf stepped forward, boots digging into the stone as he drew his newly forged greatsword. Its clean edge gleamed even in the dim glow of the dungeon crystals. Stay behind me, Welf growled. The kobolds charged. Welf met them head-on. His sword swept in a powerful arc, cleaving through the first kobold's rusted blade and body alike. Metal screamed as inferior weapons shattered on contact, splitting, bending, or exploding outright. Each swing of Welf's blade carved a clear path, but the kobolds didn't stop. They kept coming. Broken weapons were discarded mid-charge. Fallen kobolds were stepped over. Some lunged barehanded. Others grabbed dropped blades without hesitation. Their movements were reckless but persistent. Why won't they retreat? Lily shouted, firing bolts into their ranks. The Alpha Kobold watched from behind, unmoving. Then it laughed. A low, rumbling, almost amused sound escaped its throat. It wasn't mocking victory, it was enjoying the struggle. Enjoying the resistance. Enjoying the process of pressure and response. The dungeon, through this creature, was testing something. Adaptation through conflict. And beneath the massive sword embedded in the stone, the ground cracked again. A faint red glow pulsed from beneath the rubble. Cranel was still alive. The dungeon had evolved. But so had the sword god's successor. Mana detonated beneath the embedded blade. The cavern floor ruptured outward in a violent ring of shattered stone as crimson energy surged up like a living flame. Cracks spiderwebbed through the rock. Dust and debris blasted into the air, and the massive greatsword trembled where it had pinned its prey. The Alpha Kobold's eyes narrowed. Then, boom. Bell erupted from the fractured ground, stone fragments flying from his shoulders as he landed lightly a few steps away. His breath was sharp but controlled, irritation flashing across his expression as his right hand instinctively went for his katana again. It didn't move. The translucent mucus had fully hardened, binding the blade inside its sheath like crystallized resin. TCH, Bell clicked his tongue. There was no time. Instead, his hands moved to his waist. With a smooth motion, he drew the twin daggers Welf had forged for him shorter, lighter, perfectly balanced. As mana surged through Bell's body, his red aura flared violently, rippling across the cavern like a shockwave. The lesser kobolds recoiled instantly. Their crude weapons clattered as fear flooded their instincts. Several stumbled back, some even dropping to their knees, shrieking in panic at the pressure pouring from Bell's presence. But the alpha kobold roared. A deep, commanding bellow that echoed through the nest. The fear broke. The lesser kobolds snapped back into motion, regrouping into a loose, semi-organized formation, shields forward, scavenged weapons raised. They weren't disciplined, but they were responding to leadership. Bell's eyes narrowed slightly. So it can command them. The alpha kobold ripped its massive greatsword free from the stone with a grinding shriek of metal against rock. The blade, an ugly fusion of rusted steel, monster bone, and crystal, was raised overhead as the creature planted its feet. Then it attacked. The greatsword came down in a devastating horizontal arc, the sheer force of the swing splitting the air and shattering stone where it passed. The cavern walls cracked, stalagmites were cleaved in half, and piles of hoarded equipment were obliterated without care. Bell moved. He slipped past the blade's path with a single step, body twisting just enough to let the sword pass inches from his chest. Another swing followed, then another, each one faster, heavier, more deliberate. Bell evaded them all. Left, right, step in, slide out. Effortless. The alpha kobold froze for a fraction of a second. It had missed. That had never happened before. Its eyes burned with confusion and fury as it roared again, swinging harder, faster, no longer caring about the nest, the hoarded gear, or even its own followers. Equipment shattered under its blade, treasures pulverized as collateral damage. Bell darted in, daggers flashing. But the alpha kobold reacted instantly, twisting its massive sword to intercept. Sparks burst as Bell was forced back, boots skidding across stone. So fast, Bell realized. Too fast for its size. He leapt back, narrowly avoiding another crushing blow, mind racing as he assessed the situation. The daggers are too short. He could land hits, but not decisive ones. The reach difference was severe, and more importantly, this was his first real fight using twin daggers. Their balance was excellent, but he didn't yet know their limits. Forcing sword god techniques through them might snap the blades or worse, disrupt his own flow. And without flow state at full clarity, one mistake would be fatal. Bell exhaled slowly as he ducked under another sweeping strike, eyes locked on the alpha kobold's stance, its footwork, the tension in its muscles. I can't overpower it head-on. I can't finish it with these blades. So I need to change the rhythm. The alpha kobold roared and raised its sword again, confident in its strength. Bell's daggers lowered slightly. His breathing deepened. And as the next strike came down, Bell stopped thinking about attacking and began thinking about drawing the fight where he wanted it to go. Bell slipped back into the flow state, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't the blazing, overwhelming clarity he had used against humans. This was colder, sharper, analytical. The world slowed, stretching into clean, deliberate frames. The alpha kobold's movements revealed themselves in brutal honesty. Its swings were too wide for a trained swordsman, but each carried catastrophic force. Every arc displaced air like a battering ram, every impact cracking stone as if the cavern itself were fragile glass. It wasn't refined. It didn't need to be. The monster compensated for inefficiency with raw mass and momentum. Katana sealed. Daggers inadequate. Bell's mind worked rapidly. Parrying was impossible. Even deflecting would shatter his arms. The twin daggers were meant for precision close range, surgical strikes, not intercepting a slab of steel larger than his body. If he tried to force a sword god technique through them, he risked destroying the blades. Or his hands. The alpha kobold raised its massive sword and brought it down in a vertical cleave. The air screamed. Wind pressure tore through the cavern before the blade even hit, pulverizing rock walls and blasting shards outward like shrapnel. Bell didn't think, his body moved on instinct. A half step, a twist of the hips. The attack grazed past him, the shockwave throwing his cloak violently aside as the ground behind him collapsed inward. He exhaled sharply. Too close. Mana surged through his limbs as he focused inward. His aura flared not explosively, but tightly controlled and flowed into the twin daggers. Crimson light crawled along their edges, extending the blades with mana, shaping them into longer, sharper silhouettes that hummed faintly against the dungeon air. Still not enough. Bell's gaze flicked sideways just for a heartbeat. Welf was holding the line, his greatsword cleaving through charging kobolds with brutal efficiency. Lily fired bolt after bolt, her movements sharp and precise, forcing the smaller monsters back. But Bell could feel it pressure building. Kobolds were weak individually, but with the Alpha commanding them, their movements were becoming coordinated. Smarter. If this continued, someone would get overwhelmed. I have to pull it away. Bell sprinted forward, deliberately drawing the Alpha Kobold's attention. He slashed across its chest, not deep, but enough to flare its fury, then retreated toward the sloped edge of the cavern. The Alpha roared and followed. Good. But just as Bell reached the incline, something went wrong. The Alpha Kobold stopped. It didn't charge. It didn't swing. Instead, it leaned back slightly and spat. A rapid barrage of translucent mucus shot from its mouth, like launched globs of resin. Bell's eyes widened. He moved instantly, slipping between the first volley with minimal motion lean, step, twist, each evasion precise and economical. But the terrain betrayed him. The cavern slope shifted his footing. Loose stones slid beneath his boots, forcing him to adjust. One fraction of hesitation, barely a breath. A glob struck the ground near his foot and hardened instantly, stone cracking solid. Bell recoiled, heart pounding. That was deliberate. It's not just attacking. It's zoning me. Another volley came. Bell vaulted sideways, mana flaring beneath his feet, but the incline limited his momentum. He felt the danger immediately. If even a single glob touched his arms again, his daggers would be sealed just like his katana. The Alpha Kobold watched him carefully now. Not raging. Not reckless. Learning. Bell tightened his grip on the twin daggers, breathing slow and controlled despite the rising pressure in his chest. Flow state sharpened further, stripping away fear and frustration, leaving only calculation. Wide swings. Ranged ceiling attacks. Terrain control. This wasn't a beast anymore. It was a commander. And for the first time since entering the dungeon, Bell realized something unsettling. The dungeon wasn't just evolving. It was watching how he fought. Bell knew instinctively, painfully, that he had to change his approach again. The Alpha Kobold was not a beast you could bait into traps or lure with instinct alone. It didn't chase recklessly. It didn't overcommit. It waited. It stood its ground and began to roar. At first, Bell thought it was laughter, deep, guttural, rattling the cavern walls. The sound wasn't quite right for mirth, but the intent behind it was unmistakable. Mockery. The creature lifted one massive talon-like finger and dragged it slowly across its own throat, then pointed directly at Bell. A promise. The roaring continued, but something about it felt wrong. It wasn't random. The pitch rose and fell in deliberate intervals, repeating in a rhythm too precise to be coincidence. Bell's eyes widened. A command. The realization struck just as the dungeon answered. From the darkness behind him, the lesser kobolds shifted not toward the Alpha, but away from it. Their movements became purposeful, coordinated. They split off, skirting the cavern walls, redirecting their attention toward Welf and Lily. Bell's breath caught. He had planned to isolate the Alpha. Instead, the Alpha isolated him. No. Bell released his mana in a violent eruption. Crimson aura flared outward, flooding the cavern with suffocating killing intent meant to force the Alpha's focus back onto him. The pressure alone sent several lesser kobolds stumbling. But the Alpha Kobold didn't even flinch. It threw its head back and roared again, this time unmistakably laughing. Then it shifted its grip on the massive sword, planting its feet firmly into the stone floor, and assumed a stance. Bell froze. The blade disappeared behind the Alpha's body, angled low and concealed, its true length hidden from view. The posture was compact, deceptive, designed to obscure reach and timing. Wakigami, Bell whispered. A sword stance. A vein throbbed visibly at Bell's temple. So it wasn't just copying behavior. It was copying technique. Bell brought his twin daggers together, crossing them side by side. Mana surged, roaring through his arms as his aura reshaped the blade, stretching, refining, extending them into twin swords of hardened crimson energy. Sword god style. Bell barked, fury bleeding into his voice. New form twin aura blade. He launched forward. The dash was so fast it split the air, his body nearly dissolving into a streak of lightning as the ground shattered beneath his feet. For an instant, just one, Bell thought he had it. Then his momentum died. He looked down. Both of his feet were locked in place. The translucent saliva-like mucus had spread across the ground at some point during the Alpha's roars, thin, almost invisible. It hardened instantly around his boots, anchoring him to the stone like iron clamps. Too late. The Alpha Kobold moved. Even in flow state, the speed was horrifying. The massive sword swept forward in a full-force horizontal arc, tearing through the air with a scream like collapsing mountains. Bell saw everything: the path of the blade, the distortion of air, the microfractures forming in the stone walls from sheer pressure. He screamed not in fear, but defiance, and poured everything he had into his arms. Mana flared blindingly bright. The twin aura blades met the massive sword head-on. The impact shook the cavern. For a few seconds agonizing, impossible seconds, Bell held it. Stone cracked. Mana screamed. His bones vibrated violently, threatening to tear themselves apart under the strain. Then, snap. The mana construct shattered. Bell's arms bent at impossible angles as the force crushed through his guard. Pain detonated through his chest as the blade struck him squarely, launching him backward like a broken doll. Boom! His body slammed into the cavern wall, carving a massive crater and pinning him there. The world exploded into white noise. Bell coughed violently, blood spraying from his lips as his vision blurred. Every breath burned. His limbs screamed in protest. His ribs felt shattered. But even then, he didn't surrender. His eyes stayed open. His mind clawed for answers. I can't stop here. The Alpha Kobold approached slowly, its heavy footsteps echoing through the cavern. It loomed over Bell, releasing another roaring laugh, deep, satisfied, cruel. Then it turned its head toward Welf and Lily. Bell's heart dropped. The Alpha looked back at him once, just once, its red eyes gleaming with intelligence far beyond any monster Bell had faced. It knew exactly what it was doing. It wasn't just trying to kill him. It was going to break him by making him watch. Bell tried to move. Nothing answered him. His fingers twitched weakly against the stone, but the rest of his body remained unresponsive, locked in place by pain, shattered nerves, and exhaustion so deep it felt like his very soul had been weighed down. His lungs burned as he drew in shallow, ragged breaths, each one scraping through his chest like broken glass. Move, please. He forced his mind inward, reaching for the mana that had always answered his call. He tried to guide it the way Kusanagi had taught him, slowly, deliberately, circulating it through his core and into his limbs, toward his broken ribs and numb arms. Nothing. The mana stuttered, fragmented, refusing to flow. His channels felt clogged, distorted by backlash and trauma. Even his flow state, his sanctuary of clarity, remained silent. Panic crept in. No, not now. The Alpha Kobold's laughter rolled through the cavern again, thick and cruel. Bell could feel the vibration of it in his bones. The monster turned away from him, almost bored, and with deliberate slowness, it sheathed its massive sword across its back. Then it began walking toward Welf and Lily. Bell's heart screamed. He tried to shout to warn them, to beg them to run, but his throat produced nothing more than a dry, broken rasp. His voice was gone. His body refused him. His power, once so overwhelming, had abandoned him completely. I'm useless. The thought cut deeper than any wound. He had trained his entire life. Every dawn at the dojo, every blistered palm, every lesson carved into muscle and spirit by Kusanagi-hime's calm, unwavering voice. The sword is not strength, she had told him. The will behind it is. So what do I do when even my will isn't enough? The Alpha Kobold slowed its pace, glancing back over its shoulder at Bell. Its red eyes gleamed with satisfaction, savoring his helplessness. It wanted him to watch, to break. Bell's vision blurred, hot tears mixing with blood at the corner of his eyes. Please. He tried to pray. He tried to scream. Please, someone, help them. His lips trembled, forming a name without sound. Kusanagi-hime. The world shifted. A sudden pressure swept through the cavern, not heavy, not violent, but sharp, like a blade cutting through still air. The glowstones flickered as the wind changed direction, rushing from a forked corridor deeper within the cavern. The Alpha Kobold froze. Its instincts screamed. Before it could react, a golden and silver blur exploded into the chamber. The figure moved impossibly fast, gliding across the cavern floor as if skating on air, each step precise, economical, flawless. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. Bell's eyes widened. The Alpha Kobold roared and spun, drawing its massive sword in a single violent motion. Steel met steel with a thunderous clang, sparks bursting outward as the blow that should have pierced its heart was barely deflected. The blur stopped. Standing between the Alpha Kobold and Welf and Lily was a lone adventurer. Golden blonde hair flowed freely behind her, catching the glow of the dungeon crystals. She wore silver and white armor that hugged her form, not bulky, but refined, built for speed and precision. In her hands was a beautiful straight sword, white as moonlight, humming faintly with restrained power. Her stance was simple, perfect. Belle's breath caught. A sword, he whispered silently. No, a swordswoman. Hope fragile, trembling, but real sparked in Belle's chest for the first time since the battle began. Someone had come, and for the first time, the Alpha Kobold was no longer smiling.
Like and subscribe for more Danmachi fanfiction.
Chapter 7. The Storm of a Level 6. The dungeon was never silent. Even in its shallow floors, the cavern breathed stone walls exhaling mana, unseen currents of pressure coiling through narrow passages like invisible hands tightening around the throats of those who ventured too far, too carelessly. For new adventurers, the dungeon was a proving ground. For the careless, a grave. Yet deep within the second floor, far beyond where such danger should exist, something had gone wrong. A presence lingered there. A monster that did not belong. Whether it was a mutation, an anomaly, or a deliberate creation of the dungeon itself, no one could say. What was certain was this: beginner parties had begun to vanish. Survivors spoke in hushed tones of coordinated kobolds, of traps and ambushes that felt planned rather than instinctual. Adventurers returned shaken or not at all. The guild responded as it always did. A quest was posted. A standard extermination order, carefully worded to avoid panic. The target was described vaguely: an unidentified monster exhibiting abnormal behavior. A party of 5 low-level adventurers was assembled, led by a level 2 deemed experienced enough to handle an unexpected threat. They entered the dungeon. They never returned. Days passed. No report. No survivors. Not even a trace of dropped equipment retrieved by passing parties. The guild hall fell into unease. This was no longer a routine problem. Monsters did not normally migrate upward. They did not stalk parties selectively. They did not evade scouts while hunting beginners with precision. The guild convened. Names were spoken in low voices. One in particular carried weight: Gaeos Elverin, Sword Saint of Orio. Sending him would end the problem swiftly. But the implications were troubling. If a high-level adventurer was required to deal with a second-floor anomaly, what did that say about the dungeon's current state? Scouts were dispatched first. Veteran adventurers with experience in reconnaissance were sent to map patterns, track signs, gather intelligence. They returned empty-handed. No spoor. No remains. No consistent sightings. It was as if the monster chose when to exist, emerging only when the vulnerable entered its territory, retreating into the dungeon's veins when danger approached. The dungeon was hiding something. Among the guild officers, unease deepened. Theories circulated: dungeon learning patterns, fauna interference, even divine observation gone awry. None could be proven. Ina Toole sat late into the night, parchment spread across her desk, eyes tracing reports filled with absence rather than data. Missing parties. Failed scouting runs. Inconsistent survivor testimonies. It was all wrong. Then her gaze paused. Cranel, a newly registered adventurer. Officially classified as a beginner. Unofficially, anything but. Reports detailed his involvement in a guild incident, his defeat of 3 level 3 enforcers, the uncertainty surrounding his fauna-locked, unreadable, hidden by an unknown deity. Too strong for a beginner. Too inexperienced for deep floors. Exactly the kind of variable the dungeon wouldn't recognize as a threat yet. Ina leaned back slowly. If the monster truly was learning if it selected prey based on perceived weakness, then sending a high-level adventurer would only drive it deeper into hiding. But Belle was an anomaly of a different kind. Strong enough to survive. Inexperienced enough to be targeted. Unknown enough to slip beneath the dungeon's notice. The decision weighed heavily on her conscience. At dawn, Ina posted a beginner-class field study quest. Low risk, exploration-focused. Second-floor fauna observation. And quietly, deliberately, she assigned it to Cranel. If the dungeon was testing the future, then perhaps it was time to let one of its own unanswered questions step into the dark and see what answered back. Deep within the second floor of the dungeon, where the air grew heavy and the glowstones dimmed to a muted, oppressive sheen, a monster stood that should not have existed there. It was enormous, behemoth-like, its frame swollen with bulging muscle and unnatural density. Plates of armor and twisted sheets of steel were fused across its body, stitched together with hardened resin and sinew as if the creature itself had learned the value of protection. Scraps of adventurer gear, shattered shields, broken helms, and fragments of weapons were embedded into its hide, not as trophies but as reinforcement. In its hands rested a massive sword, forged from bone, steel, and scavenged scraps, its edge jagged yet deliberate. More unsettling than its size or armament, however, was how it stood. The monster held its weapon in a stance. Not the wild, overextended posture of a beast, but something measured, balanced. A form of readiness that spoke of restraint, of timing. A stance no dungeon monster was ever meant to possess. Opposite it stood a lone blonde adventurer. Her silver and white armor caught the faint crystal light as she stood casually, her straight sword hanging loosely in her right hand, tip angled downward. There was no tension in her shoulders, no wasted movement in her posture. Yet her position was precise, deliberately placed between the monster and another figure pinned against the cavern wall behind her. A young adventurer. Bloodied, injured, barely standing. She did not look back at him. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was a barrier the monster had not yet crossed. Deeper within the cavern, beyond jagged stone outcroppings and natural ridges, the clash of steel and shrieks echoed violently. Two adventurers fought desperately atop the ridge, blades flashing as they struggled to hold back a tide of lesser kobolds. Rusted weapons shattered under counterstrikes, bodies fell, yet more poured forward from the tunnels. Then the Alpha roared. The sound was not a simple bellow of rage, it was sharp, commanding, layered with intent. The lesser kobolds reacted instantly. Their chaotic assault ceased. The scattered swarm pulled back, reforming as one. They redirected their charge not toward the ridge but toward their Alpha, moving in a rough but undeniable formation. A line. The blonde adventurer's eyes narrowed. This was wrong. Dungeon monsters overwhelmed through numbers. They surged. They exhausted. They crushed through repetition. That was the known rule of the deeper floors, waves upon waves, forcing adventurers into defensive formations, rotating front lines, and sacrificial retreats. But this was coordination. Leadership. The Alpha Kobold had not only learned to fight, it had learned to command. For the first time since she had descended into the dungeon, unease settled into her chest. Not fear but recognition. If a commander-type monster could appear this early, if monsters could organize, adapt, and mimic tactics normally exclusive to adventurers, then the assumptions that kept Oreo safe were already outdated. She needed to report this. Immediately. If such an alpha emerged on deeper floors amid expeditions, amid familiar formations, the consequences would be catastrophic. Strategies built to withstand numbers would collapse against monsters that understood positioning, feints, and reinforcement timing. The dungeon had always been cruel. But this was different. This was evolution. The Alpha Kobold shifted its stance, muscles tightening, massive blade lifting with intent. The blonde adventurer adjusted her footing by a single inch, barely perceptible but enough to realign herself squarely between it and the wounded boy behind her. Her grip tightened, just slightly. The dungeon had made its move. Now, Oreo would have to respond or be taught the cost of underestimating what lurked beneath its streets. The Alpha Kobold drew in a deep, deliberate breath. The sound alone carried weight, air rushing into a chest far too large for a creature meant to lurk on the second floor. The blonde adventurer felt the shift instantly, her instincts sharpening as her body responded before thought could catch up. She loosened her stance, one foot sliding across the cavern floor with practiced ease, weight distributed for immediate movement. Her straight long sword angled forward, not raised in challenge, but positioned to cut cleanly through whatever came next. Then the Alpha exhaled. A barrage of translucent mucus erupted from its maw, fanning outward in a wide spray that coated the cavern corridor from wall to wall. The substance glistened faintly in the glow of the dungeon crystals, stretching and rippling through the air like thrown nets. The blonde adventurer did not hesitate. Ariel. The word was soft, almost casual, but the response was anything but. A violent gust of wind exploded outward from her position, a controlled yet overwhelming force that carved through the cavern like a blade. The translucent mucus was torn from the air, scattered violently in all directions. Some of it slammed back into the approaching lesser kobolds, splattering across their limbs and armor. The effect was immediate. Where the substance touched them, it hardened in an instant, crystallizing into rigid, opaque masses that locked joints and fused weapons to hands. Kobolds shrieked as their movement halted mid-step, formations collapsing into chaos as the front lines stumbled and collided with those behind them. The carefully formed line broke apart. The blonde adventurer's eyes flicked across the battlefield, analyzing without pause. She noted how the mucus behaved, not just how it hardened on impact, but how it remained gelatinous on the stone floor beneath her feet. It clung without solidifying, spreading thinly, altering the terrain without immediately becoming a trap. Delayed activation. Her grip tightened slightly. This wasn't a simple immobilizing secretion. It was selective, adaptive. A sudden roar thundered through the cavern. The alpha kobold straightened, its presence crashing down on the battlefield like a command given form. The lesser kobolds responded, instantly, panic fading, movements realigning. Those still mobile shifted positions, pulling back restrained kin, reforming their ranks with surprising speed. Order restored. The blonde adventurer exhaled slowly. So it can maintain control even under disruption. Her gaze returned to the alpha. The creature stood taller now, confidence radiating from it, not blind aggression, but assurance earned through success. It had tested her response, observed the outcome, and adjusted. This was no longer a matter of strength. This was battlefield intelligence. She understood, then, why beginner parties had vanished without a trace. Why low-level adventurers never returned. No amount of raw courage or basic tactics could compensate for an enemy that controlled terrain, coordinated units, and punished mistakes with surgical precision. This was not something a novice could survive. Not without guidance. Not without experience. Not without sacrifice. The guild's panic suddenly made sense. They were facing a threat that broke classification rules, one that didn't belong on the second floor, one that could not be addressed with routine extermination quests or standard party compositions. Sending veterans without understanding would only escalate the dungeon's response further. This situation demanded something else. Observation. Adaptation. Containment. Her eyes shifted briefly toward the injured adventurer pinned against the cavern wall behind her. He was alive barely, but conscious enough to witness what stood before him. Good. He needed to see this. The alpha kobold shifted its stance again, massive sword angling slightly, adjusting based on her wind response. It was already thinking of counters. The blonde adventurer stepped forward, placing herself fully between the monster and the wounded boy. Her expression remained calm. But inside, her thoughts sharpened with urgency. This wasn't just a battle. It was a warning. And if Oreo failed to heed it, the dungeon would not repeat itself twice. Without hesitation, the blonde adventurer moved. The cavern floor cracked beneath the point where she had stood, not from impact, but from absence. She vanished upward in a blur of silver and wind, not toward the alpha kobold, but straight for the ceiling. Her boots touched stone for less than a heartbeat before she kicked off again, propelling herself along the inverted surface as if gravity were nothing more than a suggestion. The alpha kobold's eyes widened. She dropped not to the ground but onto a lesser kobold mid-stride. The monster barely had time to screech before her blade swept outward in a wide, fluid arc. Steel sang. Heads fell. Bodies collapsed in pieces, the line around her erased in a single motion. She didn't stop. She never stopped. Another kick, this time against the cavern wall. She shot upward again, wind coiling around her legs, carried by controlled bursts of momentum rather than brute force. The translucent mucus coating the floor below was rendered irrelevant. She never touched it. Her path was a triangle of ceiling, wall, enemy repeated with ruthless efficiency. She descended into another cluster of kobolds in formation. Slash. Step. Twist. Slash. Her blade moved in clean, minimal paths, each cut precise enough to end a life without excess. Kobolds tried to raise shields. Tried to block. Tried to flee. It didn't matter. By the time their instincts caught up, she was already gone, launching herself off a falling corpse, riding the recoil back into the air. To the alpha kobold, it was disorienting. To the lesser kobolds, it was incomprehensible. They could not track her movement. Their eyes followed where she had been, never where she was going. The mucus traps they had relied on so heavily lay useless below, glistening and untouched. Panic rippled through the ranks. Then the alpha acted. With a sudden burst of strength, it seized two lesser kobolds, one in each massive hand, and hurled them, like living projectiles, toward the injured adventurer pinned against the cavern wall. The throw was brutal, precise, calculated to force a choice. The blonde adventurer's eyes widened just slightly. So it learns through pressure. She changed direction instantly. She dove, intercepting the first kobold midair. Her straight sword pierced through its skull with a sharp, efficient thrust, using its momentum rather than fighting it. She twisted her wrist, yanked the blade free, and pivoted off the dying body as if it were a stepping stone. The second kobold was already past her. She accelerated. Wind screamed as she closed the distance in a heartbeat, blade flashing once, only once. The head separated from the body cleanly, the corpse dropping lifelessly before it could reach its target. She landed lightly between the injured adventurer and the remaining kobolds, boots touching stone at last. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. Then the alpha kobold roared. It wasn't rage. It wasn't frustration. It was rhythmic, deep, rumbling, almost amused. The sound echoed through the cavern like a warped laugh, as if the monster had finally found an opponent worthy of engagement. Its massive frame shifted, sword angling slightly as it adjusted its stance again, recalibrating. It was learning her rhythm. The blonde adventurer exhaled slowly, steadying her breathing. Her blade lowered just a fraction, not in surrender, but readiness. She positioned herself once more between the injured adventurer and the lesser kobolds, stance balanced, posture calm. The remaining kobolds hesitated now. Their numbers had thinned. Their confidence had shattered. Yet they did not flee, not with the alpha's presence anchoring them in place. The alpha kobold lifted its massive sword, eyes locked onto her. The dungeon watched. The lines had been drawn not between monster and adventurer, but between adaptation and adaptation. And for the first time, the alpha kobold did not advance blindly. Neither did she. The alpha kobold changed tactics. With a guttural roar, it seized its own kin, grabbing lesser kobolds by the limbs, the torso, the neck, and hurled them without hesitation. Their screams were cut short as they became living projectiles, flung with murderous intent toward the blonde adventurer and the injured boy behind her. It did not care if they lived or died. To the alpha, they were ammunition. She moved. Each thrown kobold met its end midair. A step, a pivot, a slash, heads separated, body split, torsos pierced and discarded as she used their momentum to fuel her own movement. Her blade traced arcs of silver through the dim cavern light, and her footwork flowed seamlessly from kill to kill. She skimmed across the dungeon floor as if skating on invisible currents, uneven stone and treacherous footing rendered meaningless beneath her control. But then, impact. A wet, heavy sensation struck her chest, then her left arm, then her right leg in rapid succession. Her eyes widened as translucent mucus splattered against her armor and flesh, clinging instantly. The substance hardened with frightening speed, crystallizing across her chest plate and locking around her arm and leg like sudden shackles. She stumbled just half a step. The alpha kobold stopped throwing its kin and released another rhythmic roar, deep and reverberating, almost gleeful. It had learned. It had adapted again. The mucus hadn't been meant for the ground this time. It had been hidden among the bodies. A trap within a sacrifice. The blonde adventurer exhaled slowly. So this is how you think now. She understood then the alpha could not touch her directly. So it aimed for what she protected. It targeted the wounded adventurer. It relied on overconfidence born from a single success. And that was its mistake. Ariel. The word left her lips calmly. The dungeon answered. The storm erupted. Wind howled through the cavern, not as a single blast, but as a sustained, crushing gale. The pressure surged outward in waves, ripping dust and debris from the walls. The hardened mucus cracked, then shattered, fragments exploding away from her body as if rejected by the very air. She straightened, utterly unharmed. This, she said softly, her voice steady despite the chaos, is the difference between a level 6 adventurer and a monster like you. She stepped forward. You are strong, she continued, blade lifting slightly, but against me. Her eyes locked onto the alpha kobold. You are weak. For the first time, the alpha's expression changed. The mocking confidence vanished. Its breathing hitched. Its eyes widened, not in rage, but in something far more primal. Fear. It roared again and threw more lesser kobolds, but the storm winds caught them mid-flight, reversing their trajectory. Bodies slammed back into the alpha's position, colliding with it, crashing into one another as the gale scattered them violently. The blonde adventurer began to walk. Each step was deliberate. The alpha's instinct screamed. Panic surged through its massive frame as it searched desperately for options. Its gaze dropped to the floor, to the remaining patches of translucent mucus still spread across the stone. A trap. It smiled, sharp and desperate. But the smile froze. The gelatinous mucus began to move. The storm bent around her will, the wind flowing with intent as it lifted and dragged the mucus across the cavern floor straight into the lesser kobolds struggling to rise. The substance hardened around them, trapping limbs, sealing mouths, freezing them in place. The alpha recoiled. Too late. The air cracked. With a thunderous shockwave, the blonde adventurer vanished. She reappeared in front of the alpha kobold, sword already mid-swing. The blade passed through its neck in one flawless motion. For a heartbeat, the alpha's head remained attached, eyes blinking, mouth parted in confusion before gravity claimed it. The head struck the cavern floor with a dull thud. The body remained standing. Then she appeared behind it. 18 cuts followed, each so precise they seemed to occur simultaneously. The massive form split apart along clean lines, sections separating an instant before the dungeon claimed them. The remains exploded into ash. Silence fell. The storm dissipated. And where the Alpha Kobold had once stood, there was nothing left, save for drifting motes of dust and the quiet proof that adaptation, no matter how clever, still had its limits.
Like and subscribe for more Danmachi fanfiction.
Chapter 8. The Lesson the Dungeon Carved. Bell watched it all happen through blurred vision and pain. He was pressed against the cavern wall, his body screaming in protest, blood trickling down his chin and pooling at his collarbone. Every breath tasted like iron. His arms refused to move, his legs were numb, and the world tilted every time he tried to focus. And yet he forced his eyes to stay open. He needed to see. The blonde adventurer moved like nothing Bell had ever witnessed. She didn't fight the Alpha Kobold the way he had tried to. She didn't meet strength with strength or technique with technique. She didn't commit to a decisive blow until the battlefield itself had already been stripped of advantage. Where Bell had sought an opening, she created inevitability. She didn't just defeat the monster. She dismantled it. Bell's mind clung to the images, cataloging them even as his body threatened to shut down. The way she controlled space, never allowing herself to be cornered. The way she moved through the terrain, never once stepping where danger lingered. The way she used the ceiling, the walls, even the enemy's own kin as tools. She didn't react to the dungeon. She commanded it. When the Alpha Kobold adapted, she adapted faster. When it learned, she anticipated. When it tried to think, she had already finished deciding. Bell felt something twist painfully in his chest, not envy, not frustration, but realization. I fought it like a swordsman. She fought it like an adventurer. His training rose in his mind, unbidden. The dojo at the sword god's shrine. The clean lines of the floor. The ritual of drawing, striking, ending a fight in a single decisive motion. The belief that the strongest technique, executed faster and cleaner than the opponent's, was the path to victory. In the dojo, combat was a dialogue. In the dungeon, combat was survival. There were no bows here. No respect exchanged through stance and distance. No mutual agreement to engage. The enemy hid. The ground betrayed. The air itself could kill you. The Alpha Kobold had exploited every weakness Bell never had to consider: terrain, positioning, timing, expendable allies, delayed traps. Bell swallowed, pain flaring in his throat. I was trying to win a duel. His gaze followed the blonde adventurer as she advanced calmly, step by measured step, even when the Alpha roared and raged. She never rushed, never panicked, never overcommit. Her sword did not seek glory, it sought certainty. I should have removed the battlefield first. The thought hit him like a hammer. Bell had tried to finish the fight quickly, to overwhelm the Alpha before it could respond. But the Alpha wasn't a duelist. It was a commander. It didn't need to win exchanges, it only needed to outlast, outmaneuver, and break him. She understood that. Bell's breathing grew ragged as pain and exhaustion clawed deeper. His vision dimmed at the edges, black creeping inward like a closing curtain. He clenched his teeth, forcing himself to stay awake just a little longer. Remember this. He replayed the battle in fragments, the wind spell dispersing traps, the way she never touched the ground when it was compromised, the way she forced the Alpha to waste its resources, to reveal its thinking, to grow overconfident. She didn't fight the Alpha where it was strongest. She fought it where it was weakest, its need to control. Bell's chest heaved. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. The dungeon has no rules, no warnings, no fairness, no honor, no mercy. A dojo was a place of refinement. The dungeon was a place of truth. An adventurer wasn't someone who fought beautifully. An adventurer was someone who lived. His eyes struggled to focus on her final movements, the clean, merciless execution, the 18 cuts that ended the Alpha before it even understood it had lost. There was no hesitation, no ceremony, just the absolute conclusion of threat. That is experience. That is thinking beyond the blade. Bell felt his consciousness slipping, his body finally demanding the rest it had been denied. His breathing hitched, a soft sound escaping his throat as his strength ebbed away. I need to change. The thought burned itself into him not as regret, but resolve. If I want to survive here, if I want to protect others, I can't fight like I'm still in the dojo. Darkness surged. Belle's eyes fluttered once more, catching a final glimpse of the blonde adventurer standing alone amid drifting ash calm, untouchable, impossibly distant. Then the world went quiet, and Belle Cranel lost consciousness, carrying with him the first true lesson the dungeon had carved into his soul. The return to the surface felt unreal. Belle drifted in and out of consciousness as the stone corridors of the dungeon gave way to the wide stairways leading back to Orio. His body was wrapped in bandages by the time they reached the city gates, his breathing shallow but steady. Lilaruka Arde walked close to his side, her usual sharp tongue replaced by tight-lipped worry, while Welf Kratzo carried Belle's katana and pack with an uncharacteristic silence. The blonde swordswoman Ace Wallenstein walked a few steps ahead of them, uninjured, her posture unchanged from the moment she had ended the Alpha Kobold. At the edge of the city, Belle was immediately handed over to the healers of Mayak Familia. It was the safest choice, reliable antidotes, experienced healers, and no unnecessary questions. Belle was laid on a clean bed, light magic washing over his battered body while healers checked for fractures, internal damage, and traces of poison. Lily and Welf were treated beside him, their injuries less severe but still concerning after prolonged exposure to the Alpha Kobold's tactics. Belle never fully woke during the process. But even unconscious, his hands twitched faintly, as if still gripping an invisible sword. Once Belle's condition stabilized and it was confirmed that no lingering toxins remained, Ace turned back toward the guild. Duty came before rest. The guild hall was busier than usual, tension hanging thick in the air. Rumors had already begun circulating, whispers of missing parties, unusual movements on the second floor, and emergency postings quietly pulled down. When Ace stepped inside, conversation slowed. More than a few adventurers straightened unconsciously at her presence. She reported directly to the front desk. Ina Tool listened in growing disbelief. An Alpha Kobold? Ina repeated, her voice pitching upward. On the second floor? Ace nodded calmly. Confirmed. Coordinated lesser units. Terrain control. Delayed immobilization traps. The words landed like hammer blows. Several nearby guild administrators froze mid-task, their attention snapping toward Ina. Papers stopped rustling. Quills hovered in the air. That's impossible, one muttered. Ace continued without pause, her tone even. It avoided veteran scouts, targeted beginners, demonstrated adaptive behavior during combat. Ina's face drained of color. Before Ace could elaborate further, Ina grabbed her wrist. Come with me, she said sharply. A moment, Ace began, but Ina was already moving, pulling her through a side corridor of the guild hall at a pace that left no room for protest. Clerks and adventurers scattered out of the way as Ina marched straight toward the inner structure of the building. They stopped in front of a large, reinforced door. Ina didn't knock. She shoved it open. The guild director yelped. Stacks of documents flew into the air as he flailed backward in his chair, instinctively throwing up his hands. Papers fluttered down like snow, covering the desk, the floor, and one unfortunate potted plant. The man dressed in a black coat over white garments. The guild insignia pinned proudly to his chest glared over the mess with one twitching eye. Black hair streaked with gray framed a face that had seen too many emergencies to appreciate new ones. Ina, he said slowly, how many times have I told you to knock? Ina froze mid-step. Sorry, she said, scratching her cheek with a sheepish laugh. Then she straightened instantly. But director, we have a grave situation. It's about the dungeon. The guild director sighed long, deep, and full of exhaustion. Of course it is. He gestured for them to sit, rubbing his temples as he moved around the desk. You owe me tea after this. Strong tea. Yes, sir, Ina said immediately. She ushered Ace to a chair near the couch, then hurried to prepare tea at the side station. The guild director lowered himself onto the couch opposite Ace, posture attentive now despite his irritation. Go on, he said. Ace clasped her hands loosely in her lap. I encountered an Alpha Kobold on the second floor, she began. It exhibited behavior inconsistent with known classifications. It commanded lesser kobolds, utilized scavenged equipment as armor, and employed immobilization tactics using hardened mucus. The guild director's brow furrowed. It fought tactically, Ace continued. It adjusted strategies mid-battle. It attempted to isolate and psychologically break a wounded adventurer. Ina returned quietly, placing tea between them. That explains the disappearances, the director murmured. Yes, Ace said. Beginner and rookie adventurers were specifically targeted. The monster avoided high-level threats. Silence stretched across the room. The implications were clear and terrifying. This isn't just a stronger monster. Ina said softly. It's learning. The director leaned back, eyes closing briefly. The dungeon responding to pressure. Again, Ace nodded once. If this behavior spreads to deeper floors, standard expedition tactics will be compromised. The director opened his eyes. And the adventurer you rescued? He asked. A rookie, Ace replied. Bell Cranel. Severely injured, but alive. He engaged the Alpha Kobold directly. The director raised an eyebrow. Engaged? Yes. Ina stiffened. Bell. Fought it. Ace hesitated for the first time. He lost, but he survived longer than expected. He adapted mid-battle. The director exchanged a look with Ina. That name keeps appearing, he said quietly. Ina nodded. Unknown Falna. Locked by an unidentified deity. Classified beginner, but not one, the director finished. Ace rose from her seat. I recommend immediate revision of beginner floor classifications. Increased patrols. Temporary restriction of unsupervised exploration. And Bell Cranel? The director asked. Ace paused. He needs guidance, she said. Not punishment. The director exhaled slowly. Very well, he said. We'll convene an emergency council. This information stays classified until we decide how to proceed. Ina bowed her head. Understood. As Ace turned to leave, the director spoke again. Ace. She looked back. You may have just saved the city from something far worse, he said. Ace inclined her head slightly. I only did what was necessary. The moment Ace Wallenstein stepped out into the main hallway of the guild, the weight of what she had reported finally settled into the silence she left behind. The guild director remained seated for several long seconds after the door closed, hands folded, eyes unfocused. The chamber smelled faintly of tea and ink, but neither brought him any comfort. The dungeon had always been dangerous, that was its nature, but danger followed rules. Patterns. Escalations that could be predicted, countered, managed. This did not. At last, he exhaled. This cannot remain isolated, he said quietly. Ina Toole, who had lingered near the door with her hands clasped behind her back, straightened at once. I understand. We will need the top familius, the director continued. Not just combat power information, resources, influence. If the dungeon has begun producing unorthodox entities on the upper floors, then Oreo itself is already compromised. Ina nodded, her expression serious now. I'll draft the letters immediately. Loki Familia, Freya Familia, Ganesha Familia, Mayak, Dionysus, and the others who need to know. I'll mark it as a mandatory guild convocation. Good, the director said. Discretion is paramount. Panic would be worse than ignorance. Yes, sir. Ina bowed once, sharply, then turned and hurried from the chamber, already mentally composing the formal summons that would shake the upper echelons of Oreo. The guild director rose slowly from his seat. His joints protested, a reminder of age and years spent mediating crises rather than facing them head-on. He crossed the chamber to the massive windows that dominated the second floor of the guild hall. From here, Oreo sprawled beneath him in layered terraces of stone and light. Markets bustled. Smoke curled from forges. Adventurers laughed, argued, prepared for dives into a dungeon that none of them yet understood was changing. He rested a hand against the cool glass. Something must have caused this, he murmured. The dungeon does not act without reason. Turning away, he returned to his desk, not to the scattered papers, but to the polished wood beneath. He knelt slightly, slid his left hand under the desk's edge, and pulled. A soft click echoed. Hidden mechanisms stirred to life. Behind him, one of the large bookshelves lining the wall began to move. Stone ground against stone as the shelf slid aside, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. Cool air rushed outward, carrying with it the faint scent of old magic and sealed secrets. The director took a nearby magic lamp from its hook, its flame flickering to life with a steady golden glow. Without hesitation, he stepped into the passage. The bookshelf slid shut behind him. The corridor beyond was ancient, older than the current guild hall itself. Runes etched into the walls, ceiling, and steps glimmered faintly as the lamp passed, forming interlocking patterns that twisted perception. Any who entered without authorization would find their sense of direction unraveling, corridors looping impossibly, stairs leading nowhere, minds gradually clouded until retreat felt impossible. This was no ordinary hidden passage. It was one of Aurario's veins. The guild director walked carefully, staff tapping softly against stone. These corridors were known only to a select few, those vetted across generations, sworn not merely to secrecy, but to purpose. They connected the guild hall to the deepest administrative and divine heart of the city. Babel Tower. not its public halls, bustling with adventurers and gods, but the spaces beneath. The places unseen. There were many such passages, branching like roots beneath Aurora leading to barracks, sanctums, observation chambers, and secure relay points scattered across the city. They were used by Uranus's subordinates, watchers who served neither profit nor fame, but balance. The path twisted downward for what felt like far longer than it should have. Time felt muted here. At last, the corridor ended in a blank stone wall. The director stopped. He raised his lamp and murmured a low incantation, ancient syllables shaped carefully. The runes along the wall responded, igniting in soft blue light. Lines shifted, rearranged, then the wall parted soundlessly. Beyond lay a vast chamber. Blue-flamed torches lined the walls, their light steady and cold, illuminating an open space carved from white stone. The ceiling arched high overhead, etched with constellations and sigils that mirrored the heavens above Oreo. At the far end stood a marble throne, simple in design, yet heavy with presence. Upon it sat Uranus. The god of the heavens remained motionless, hands resting lightly upon the arms of his throne, eyes closed as if in meditation. Around him floated dozens of window-like frames made of magic, transparent panes showing live scenes across Oreo. The market districts, residential blocks, forges, barracks, dungeon entrances. Every pulse of the city laid bare under divine observation. The guild director exhaled quietly. He approached the center of the chamber and knelt, placing his lamp before him. "My lord," he said, voice steady despite the weight pressing upon him. "I bring troubling news." Uranus's eyes opened slowly. At a gesture of his right hand, the floating windows dissolved into motes of light, leaving only the torches and the throne. "Speak," the god said. The director recounted everything. The missing beginner parties, the failed scouting attempts, the emergence of an alpha kobold on the second floor, its intelligence, its tactics, its selective targeting. He spoke of coordinated formations, of terrain control, of adaptive learning in the midst of battle. When he finished, silence filled the chamber. Uranus leaned back slightly, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Such behavior should not manifest so early," the god said at last. "Not without stimulus." "There is more," the director replied. "The information comes from a reliable source." Ace Wallenstein encountered the creature directly. Uranus's gaze sharpened. "Ace, then the report carries weight." "Yes," the director said. "She eliminated the alpha personally." The god nodded once. "Then the threat was real." A pause. "And the adventurer who survived the encounter before her arrival?" Uranus asked. The director swallowed. "Bel Cranel." Uranus tilted his head slightly. That name again. The director felt a bead of sweat slide down his temple. "He survived the encounter, my lord." "Barely. He was severely injured, but alive." "And his fauna?" Uranus asked calmly. "Locked," the director replied. "By an unknown deity. Even guild instruments cannot read it." Silence returned, heavier than before. Uranus closed his eyes once more. "The dungeon responds to pressure," he said slowly. "When gods descend, when fauna spreads, when mortals push deeper and faster than before. This city is built atop a living contradiction, growth and containment." He opened his eyes. "An intelligent monster on the second floor is not coincidence," Uranus continued. "It is correction." The director bowed his head lower. "Then what must we do?" Uranus's gaze drifted toward the empty space where the windows had been, as if still seeing the city beyond. "Observe," he said. "Contain. Adapt." He paused. "And watch Bel Cranel carefully." The director's heart skipped. "Yes, my lord." For above them, Oreo slept unaware. And beneath it, the dungeon had begun asking questions that only blood, choice, and evolution could answer. Far from Ororio's light, far from the prayers offered to gods and the laughter of adventurers, there existed a place that should not have been. The chamber was vast, carved from black stone that seemed to drink in the dim crimson glow of the magic lamps lining the walls. Blood stained everything. It pooled along the grooves of the floor, thick and sticky in places, flaked and dark where it had dried long ago. The smell was overwhelming: iron, rot, burned flesh, and alchemical reagents mixed into something nauseatingly sweet. Rows of bodies were bound to the walls. Humans, elves, dwarves, beastmen, halms. Some were unconscious, heads drooping forward, breath shallow. Others were awake, eyes glassy with pain and terror, their mouths gagged by runic bindings that glowed faintly whenever they tried to scream. Magic sigils crawled over iron restraints, locking muscles, suppressing fauna. sealing mana pathways with cruel precision. Opposite them, mirrored in grotesque symmetry, were dungeon monsters. Kobolds with broken limbs. Orcs missing tusks. Lizardmen with cracked scales. Even a minotaur-like creature lay slumped against the wall, its massive frame restrained by chains thick as tree trunks. All were alive. All were bound. All were silent, their instincts smothered by magic that forced compliance. Between them lay the inner chamber. An iron table more bed than slab stood at its center. Runes pulsed along its edges, feeding power into restraints that held a humanoid figure spread wide upon it. The victim's body twitched uncontrollably as arcs of magic crawled over exposed flesh. Blood ran freely, dripping down the sides of the table into waiting channels cut into the floor. A hooded figure stood over the body. They worked calmly, methodically. In one hand, a pair of tweezers glinted in the low light. In the other, a thin, impossibly sharp knife etched with runic markings. The blade slid into flesh with practiced ease, peeling back muscle, severing sinew, exposing organs that glistened wetly under the lamps. The humanoid screamed, or tried to. Their cries were choked, reduced to hoarse gasps as magic constricted their throat whenever the pain spiked too high. Tears streamed down their face as the hooded figure removed something vital, set it aside carefully, then reached for a tray of preserved monster flesh. Kobold muscle fibers, still twitching faintly. A monster's heart, stabilized in a crystal vial. Fragments of bone, etched with runes. The hooded figure grafted them in place with meticulous precision, stitching flesh to flesh, organ to organ, magic sealing the impossible union as if it were always meant to be so. The suffering did not slow them. A loud clang echoed through the chamber. The hooded figure did not look up. Metal groaned as a massive iron door slid open, gears grinding somewhere deep within the walls. Heavy footsteps followed, measured, disciplined. A man entered. He wore a cloak over full armor, its surface dulled and deliberately unadorned. A mask concealed his face entirely, smooth and featureless save for narrow slits for the eyes. His presence was controlled, restrained, like a weapon kept sheathed by habit rather than lack of intent. "The Alpha Kobold has been eliminated," he said. His voice was flat, professional. "By a high-ranking adventurer. Loki Familia." The hooded figure paused. For the first time since the man had entered, the knife stopped moving. Silence stretched just long enough to feel deliberate. Then the hooded figure resumed their work. "It does not matter," they replied, voice distorted, warped by magic or something deeper. Genderless, inhumanly calm. The Alpha Kobold was a promising specimen, but ultimately, a failure. It adapted too slowly. It relied too heavily on imitation. They plucked a piece of monster tissue from a tray and fitted it into the open cavity of the screaming humanoid. "I have no use for failures." The masked man inclined his head slightly, as if he had expected that answer. He turned toward the door, cloak shifting as he took a step away. Then the hooded figure spoke again. "The demon," they said softly. "The one deployed into the city. What became of it?" The masked man stopped. For a brief moment, he remained motionless, back still turned. Then he slowly pivoted to face the chamber once more. "She was eliminated," he said, "by a rookie adventurer." The tweezers slipped from the hooded figure's hand. They clattered against the iron table, sharp sound ringing through the chamber. "A rookie," the hooded figure repeated. "Yes," the masked man confirmed. "Bell Cranel." The hooded figure froze completely. The knife remained embedded in flesh, unmoving. The lamps flickered as the magic in the room pulsed erratically for a heartbeat. "Another failure," the hooded figure said at last. But before the masked man could turn away again, he added, "The demon caused significant damage. She slaughtered multiple adventurers in the market district before being stopped. Panic spread. The city bled." Silence answered him. The hooded figure did not respond. They simply stared down at the mutilated body on the table, at the stitched flesh and monster organs slowly integrating under the influence of magic. Satisfied, or perhaps simply finished, the masked man turned and left. The iron door slammed shut behind him with a final, echoing clang, sealing the chamber once more. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the hooded figure straightened. They lifted their heads slowly, the shadows of the hood obscuring whatever expression lay beneath. A single name slipped from their lips, barely louder than a breath. "Bell Cranel." At first, it was a chuckle. Low, broken. Then it grew. Laughter spilled out, sharp and unrestrained, echoing wildly through the chamber. It bounced off stone and iron and screaming throats, rising into something manic and unhinged. "A rookie," the hooded figure rasped between laughs. "A variable I did not account for." Again, They leaned over the iron table, laughter still shaking their frame, and whispered into the ear of the trembling humanoid strapped beneath them. This world is becoming far more interesting than I anticipated. The laughter continued. And somewhere far above, unaware of the gaze now fixed upon him, Cranel slept, wounded, having drawn the attention of something that did not yet know whether it wanted to break him or remake him.
Like and subscribe for more Danmachi fanfiction.
Chapter 9. The Guild Invitation. The guild hall had learned how to sound calm during disasters. It was an old skill polished through generations of monster outbreaks, divine feuds, and catastrophes that threatened to spill panic into the streets. Voices were kept low. Footsteps were measured. Clerks moved with purpose, not urgency. From the outside, everything looked routine. Inside, tension coiled like a drawn bowstring. Ina Toole stood behind the reception counter, fingers tightening around the edge of her ledger as she listened to yet another whispered argument unfold nearby. You're telling me a beginner survived that? Survived isn't the word they're using. They say he fought it. That's impossible. Not impossible. Unverified. Ina closed her eyes briefly, then exhaled through her nose and straightened her posture. She turned, fixing the two junior administrators with a look sharp enough to cut through parchment. Lower your voices, she said. Calm, firm, professional. If you're going to speculate, do it after hours. The two flushed and returned to their work, but the silence that followed was worse. It hummed with unspoken questions. Cranel's name was not written on any official notice board. There were no bulletins, no announcements, no formal commendations or condemnations. Yet his absence filled the guild hall more completely than any proclamation ever could. Because he wasn't here. The bed in the medical ward remained occupied. He was alive, stabilized, and still unconscious the last Ina had checked, but he wasn't standing at the counter, wasn't fumbling through beginner forms, wasn't asking questions that revealed how little he understood the dungeon. And because of that, the city had begun to talk. At the edge of the hall, a group of mid-level adventurers lingered longer than necessary after turning in their reports. They pretended to study quest postings while glancing sideways, listening for scraps of information. I heard he beat 3 enforcers. No, that was a rumor. A spar, maybe. My supporter swears it happened. One move. They couldn't even react. That's not strength. That's experience. Or something worse. The last voice dropped lower, edged with discomfort. Ina pretended not to hear, but the words lodged uncomfortably in her chest. Dangerous variable. She hated that phrase. Across the hall, a senior administrator was already buried under inquiries. Familius requesting clarification. Independent adventurers demanding reassessment of floor safety. Supporters asking if new restrictions were coming. And beneath all of it ran a single question unspoken, but omnipresent. What is Cranel? The locked fauna was the problem. Or rather, the implication of it. Specialized instruments had been brought out. Old ones. Trusted ones. Devices designed to read divine blessings even when gods tried to obscure them. Every test returned the same result. Presence confirmed, information denied. A fauna existed. Its details did not. That alone would have been enough to stir concern. But layered atop the reports, the alpha kobold, the adaptive tactics, the survivor who engaged it directly, it became something else entirely. A mystery with teeth. In the guild's administrative wing, parchment rustled endlessly as analysts compared notes that refused to align. Beginner classification doesn't hold. Intermediate stats don't match eyewitness accounts. He lacks dungeon knowledge. And yet he recognized advanced combat stances. That suggests training outside Oreo. Or a concealed patron. The word concealed was underlined twice, hard enough to tear the page. Ina rubbed her temple as she passed the doorway, catching just enough of the discussion to feel her headache bloom. She wanted to step in, to remind them that Belle was a person, not a problem to be solved. But even she couldn't deny the truth. The city was uneasy. By evening, the rumors had spilled beyond the guild hall and into Aurario's veins. Taverns were always faster than officials. At a corner table in a dimly lit bar, tankards clinked as voices rose and fell in half-drunken debate. They say he walked out alive while veterans vanished. That's not skill. That's luck. Luck doesn't teach you how to survive a commander monster. You weren't there. No one saw it clearly. My cousin's supporter was. She said the kid didn't scream, didn't panic. That's worse. Laughter followed, brittle and forced. Or maybe he's blessed. Or cursed. A serving girl paused mid-step, listening with wide eyes before hurrying away. At another table, a pair of supporters exchanged worried looks. Beginners leaned closer, fear and fascination warring in equal measure. To them, Cranel was no longer just a name. He was a possibility. For some, hope proof that survival wasn't limited to veterans and elites. For others, a warning evidence that the dungeon was changing faster than anyone wanted to admit. And for a few, something to be watched carefully. Back at the guild, night settled into the high windows, staining the marble floors with amber light. Ina sat alone at her desk, stacks of reports untouched. She held a single document instead, the medical update from Mayak Familia. Stable. Consciousness uncertain. Recovery expected. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Still alive. Her relief was tempered by the memory of his expression before he'd collapsed, focused, not afraid. Determined in a way that didn't fit a newcomer. She closed the file and rested her hands atop it. He doesn't even know, she murmured softly. Belle had walked into Orio looking for a named Kusanagi-heim. Instead, the city had found him. And now Orio was speaking in its own language. Whispers, glances, meetings held behind closed doors. Bells were rung quietly. Doors opened just a little wider. Eyes lingered where they hadn't before. The guild director's office remained dark, but light burned in adjacent rooms. Messengers came and went, sealing letters, stamping wax, preparing invitations that would not be posted publicly. Because this was not a matter for the streets. This was a matter for power. Ina stood at last, gathering her things. As she passed the medical ward once more, she paused outside the door. Through the faint glow of healing lamps, she could see the still shape beneath the sheets. Cranel did not stir. Yet even in sleep, his presence felt loud. Because he didn't need to speak anymore. The city of Orio had begun telling his story for him, and it could not agree on what he was. Inatul wrote until her wrist ached. Not because the words were difficult. She had drafted summons for monster outbreaks, emergency expeditions, and familia disputes that ended in broken furniture and bruised pride. This time, the strain came from what the letters implied. A monster had appeared where it shouldn't. It had hunted beginners with intention, and the guild had been forced to admit quietly, carefully, that the dungeon was no longer behaving like a predictable resource. The council being called was not a ceremony. It was an alarm bell wrapped in polite ink. She lined up the parchment on her desk, each sheet identical in quality, each seal prepared separately. The same invitation, rephrased 5 ways because the same words never landed the same in different hands. Ina dipped her quill, steadying her breath. This wasn't about Cranel. Not on paper. On paper, this was about the city. And the familias that held Orio together needed to be reminded subtly what they were responsible for. The Loki Familia Manor did not receive visitors so much as it evaluated them at the door. When Ina's messenger arrived, he was met by a corridor of competence, a guard at the gate, a second at the steps, and a third who didn't look like a guard at all until the messenger realized the man's posture was too perfect to be casual. The letter was taken without ceremony. It traveled through hands that measured weight and intent the same way they measured steel. It reached Finn Dame before the wax had fully cooled. Finn read the invitation once, then again, slowly. Not because he didn't understand it, but because he heard what wasn't written. Upper floor anomaly. Adaptive tactics. Beginner disappearances. Immediate revision of safety assumptions. His thumb pressed lightly against the page as if testing whether the parchment would yield the rest of the truth. "Where's the full report?" he asked, voice calm. Riveria, seated nearby with a cup of tea, did not look up from her own copy. "It says the details will be presented in closed meeting." "Which means," Gareth rumbled, "they're scared it'll leak." Finn nodded once. "Or they're not sure how to say it yet." At the far end of the room, Loki lay draped over a couch like a goddess who had declared war on sobriety and was losing one leg hanging off, hair half-tied, cup in hand. She squinted at the paper Riveria had tossed her. "A meeting?" Loki whined. "With guild people? Ugh, that's work." She rolled onto her back dramatically. "Tell him I'm sick. Tell him I'm dying. Tell him my liver is staging a rebellion." Riveria's eyes narrowed. "You are attending." Loki pointed at her. "You can go. You love meetings. You've got that, I'm judging your grammar, face ready at all times." Finn didn't smile, but something in his eyes softened, then cooled again. "This is likely not optional," he said. Loki groaned louder. "Everything is optional if you run fast enough." In the corner, Ace Wallenstein stood quietly, still in her travel clothes. The invitation lay folded in her hand, but her gaze wasn't on the parchment. It was on Finn. She didn't comment, didn't offer an opinion, didn't defend her own role in the incident. She simply listened, attentive in a way that wasn't passive. Like a blade resting in its sheath, silent, but present. Finn noticed. "Ace," he said gently. Anything you think the guild will ask? Ace's eyes shifted, thoughtful. What it did. Finn nodded. And what it meant. He folded the invitation neatly. We attend, he decided. We take notes. We ask for data. And we prepare for the possibility that this isn't the only anomaly. Loki sighed into her cup. Fine, but I'm bringing alcohol to the meeting. Riveria's stare sharpened. No. Loki grinned. Yes. Finn's tone remained even. Cautious. Analytical. No grandstanding. Gareth chuckled. So. Riveria talks, and Loki behaves. Loki raised her cup. I will behave like a saint. Riveria didn't blink. You don't know what that word means. He said nothing. But her grip on the folded paper tightened just slightly. Freya Familia did not require an invitation to become involved. They required only assent. A whisper. A thread of fate that tugged at Freya's attention the way perfume lingers in a room after someone has left. No official messenger reached Folkvanger. Not from the guild. Because everyone in the guild understood a simple truth. Freya would either come because she wanted to, or not come at all. A letter would not change that. Still, information moved. It always did. In a quiet corridor of Freya Familia's estate, Haydeen Selland received a report from a subordinate, spoken softly, respectfully, as if even the walls might be listening. Guild convocation, the subordinate said. Emergency. Dungeon anomaly on floor 2. The name involved is Cranel. Haydeen's expression did not change. Not visibly. But his eyes sharpened, like a man hearing a familiar note in a song he hadn't realized he remembered. Cranel, he repeated. Yes. Haydeen dismissed the subordinate with a subtle gesture. Then he walked alone through immaculate halls that smelled faintly of roses and expensive silence, until he reached a chamber where Freya sat, as if she had always been there, calm, luminous, unhurried. He knelt. My lady, he said. The guild is gathering the major familias. The dungeon has produced an anomaly. Freya's smile was small. Private. Anomaly. Haydeen continued, controlled. An alpha-type monster on the second floor. Tactical behavior. Beginner disappearances. Ace Wallenstein confirmed. Freya's eyes, impossibly clear, lifted slightly. And the survivor? Haydeen paused only a fraction. Cranel. Something shifted in the air. Not pressure. Not mana. Attention. Freya's fingers rested against her cheek as if she were bored, but her gaze had gone distant, focused on something she could sense but not yet name. Unfinished, she murmured. Haydeen's posture remained perfect. Shall I prepare a response? Freya's smile deepened, predatory in its gentleness. There is no need to respond. She stood, and the room seemed to breathe with her movement. The guild will speak, Freya said softly. Let them lay their fears on a table and call it strategy. Her eyes turned toward a window that looked out over Orio, like the city was a stage, and she could already predict its next lines. Haydeen, she said. Yes, my lady. You will attend in my place. Haydeen did not react. Understood. Freya stepped closer, her voice lowering into something intimate, inevitable. And listen carefully. Haydeen's eyes flicked up. For what? Freya's smile was slow. For the parts they avoid saying. She turned away, satisfied, as if the meeting had already happened in her mind. Haydeen rose, expression still composed. But inside him, something acknowledged a truth he would never speak aloud. Cranel had entered Orio like a spark, and Freya had noticed the smoke. Ganesha Familia. Shakti Verma read the invitation standing up, because she didn't have time to sit down for problems like this. Her barracks were loud with training steel on steel, boots striking stone, commanders barking corrections. The invitation felt almost out of place in her hands, too clean and polite. She skimmed it once, then looked at the officer beside her. Floor 2, Shakti said. Yes, the officer replied. The disappearances matched the timeline. Shakti's jaw tightened. That floor should be safe enough for rookies with common sense. The officer hesitated. It wasn't common sense that failed. Shakti exhaled, then folded the letter with crisp finality. This isn't about heroics, she said. It's about containment. Public confidence. If word spreads that the beginner floors are compromised, you'll have panic. Less diving. Less income. Less stability. More crime. A subordinate nodded. And opportunists. Shakti's eyes narrowed. Exactly. She tapped the folded invitation against her palm like a baton. We attend. We push for patrol adjustments and a temporary advisory. We propose a controlled announcement, not secrecy that leaks like a broken barrel. And Cranel? The officer asked cautiously. Shakti's expression remained pragmatic. Monitored, she said. Not recruited. Not paraded. Not hunted. She turned toward the training floor. A rookie surviving doesn't make him a solution. It makes him a data point. And if the dungeon is changing, the city needs stability more than it needs another legend. Her voice hardened into command. Prepare a representative squad. If this anomaly repeats, Ganesha Familia will respond fast and publicly. Because that was their role. They were not the sharpest blade. They were the shield that kept Oreo from splintering. Mayak Familia. Mayak Familia's clinic smelled like herbs, warm water, and quiet. No banners. No grand halls. No armed guards evaluating every shadow. When the guild's letter arrived, it was received the same way everything was received here, with hands that cared more about steadiness than status. Nina, a healer, set the invitation on a table beside a bowl of clean bandages. From the guild, she said softly. Mayak read it in silence, brow faintly furrowed not from fear, but from a tired kind of disappointment. So it's come to this, he murmured. Natsa, seated with a ledger and a cup of tea she'd forgotten to drink, looked up. A meeting? Yes. Mayak folded the letter. They want the major familias present. Natsa's eyes drifted toward the curtained bed where Bell lay. Even asleep, he looked like someone who had fought too hard for too long. They'll talk about him like a tool, she said quietly. Mayak didn't deny it. We'll attend, Mayak said, but not for their politics. Natsa raised an eyebrow. Then for what? Mayaka's voice softened. To remind them there is a boy under all their speculation. He set the letter down carefully, like it was fragile. No pressure, he added. No ambition. No recruitment games. If they ask what we want from Cranel. He glanced again at the bed. The answer is nothing. I want him to wake up. Natsa's expression tightened with reluctant agreement. And if they decide he's a risk? Mayaka's eyes, gentle but firm, lifted. Then we argue, he said simply. Because compassion is also a kind of resistance. Dionysus Familia received the invitation with smiles. That was the first thing wrong with it. Not a warm smile. Not a friendly one. A serene, almost delighted acceptance like tragedy was a vintage being uncorked. Philvis Chalia read the guild's letter in a quiet room lit by soft lamps. Dionysus lounged nearby, swirling a glass of wine as if time itself could be tasted. Philvis's eyes moved steadily across the text, but her face didn't change. Floor 2 anomaly, she murmured. Adaptive behavior. Tactical intelligence. Dionysus's smile widened faintly. How lovely. Philvis looked up. Lovely. He shrugged. The dungeon has always been a story, hasn't it? It speaks, we respond. We pretend we understand. And then it surprises us. Philvis returned to the letter, but her fingers tightened. It targeted beginners, she said. Avoided veterans. Selective predation, Dionysus mused. That implies awareness. Philvis's gaze sharpened. Or guidance. Dionysus lifted his glass slightly. You're thinking in arrows again. I'm thinking in causes, Philvis replied. She folded the invitation. We attend. Dionysus hummed. Of course we do. Philvis paused, then added slowly. I want the raw testimony from the Loki Familia member who killed it. And I want every detail about the mucus. Dionysus tilted his head. You're interested in monsters. Philvis's voice grew quieter. I'm interested in why this is happening now. Dionysus's smile did not reach his eyes. Perhaps, he said gently, because someone finally asked the right question. Philvis stared at him a moment longer than polite conversation required. Something about the way he spoke too smooth, too pleased made the room feel colder. She turned away first. And as she did, Dionysus took a slow sip of wine, watching her like a man enjoying a play he had already read. By the time the last seal cooled, Ina's desk was empty of letters and full of dread. Each invitation had gone out like a stone dropped into water. Now Oreo waited for the ripples. Because the meeting wasn't truly about Bell. It was about what the dungeon had begun to become. And what Oreo would do when the rules it relied on stopped being reliable. The guild hall had never been silent.
Like and subscribe for more Danmachi fanfiction.
Chapter 10, The Guild Meeting.
The guild hall had never been silent. Even at dawn, even during crises, there was always movement. Boots on stone, quills scratching parchment, clerks calling numbers, adventurers arguing over payouts. Noise was Aurario's proof of life. Today, the silence was deliberate. The main council chamber lay sealed behind reinforced doors etched with suppression runes. Guards stood at measured intervals, not for show, but to ensure that what was discussed inside did not leave prematurely. The room itself was circular, designed to deny hierarchy through seating, yet everyone inside knew exactly where power rested. At the highest seat sat the guild director, posture composed, hands folded, expression carefully neutral. Behind him, The guild emblem loomed. An abstract sigil meant to symbolize balance between gods, mortals, and the dungeon itself. Around the table sat senior guild officials, veterans of crises ranging from monster outbreaks to divine disputes. Some wore the fatigue of years. Others carried the sharpness of ambition barely restrained by protocol. And then there were the familiar representatives. They arrived not together, but in staggered intervals, each entrance a quiet statement of presence. The guild director stood. No gavel, no announcement, just a simple rise that drew all attention like gravity. "Thank you for attending on short notice," he began. "This meeting is classified at the highest level of guild authority. What is discussed here does not leave this room unless authorized by this council." A pause. "You are here because the dungeon has violated an assumption." That was all it took. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, controlled, restrained, but sharp. The director gestured, and a senior official activated a projection crystal at the center of the table. Light flared, resolving into layered diagrams. Dungeon floor maps, encounter logs, casualty timelines. 14 beginner parties, the director continued, went missing or were incapacitated over a span of 10 days. All incidents occurred between the first and second floors. A low, incredulous sound escaped one of the officials. "That's impossible," a woman from the Economic Bureau said. "Those floors are regulated. Patrol schedules were followed," the director cut in calmly. "Which is why the losses were initially attributed to individual error." Another official leaned forward. "Until the pattern emerged. The projection shifted. A red marker pulsed over a cavern zone. An alpha kobold manifested here," the director said, "but not as we understand the classification." Finn Deemney's gaze sharpened. "Define not as we understand," he said. The director inclined his head. "This alpha was not merely larger or stronger. It demonstrated adaptive intelligence." A murmur spread, this time less restrained. "Adaptive how?" Shaktivarma asked, voice firm. "Selective engagement," the director replied. "It avoided veteran scouts. It targeted beginners and rookies specifically. It utilized scavenged equipment, armor, weapons, traps." Philvis Chalia's eyes flicked up. "Define traps." "Hardened secretion," the director said. "Used to immobilize limbs, seal weapons, and control terrain. Deployed tactically." Silence fell. Then Loki laughed. A sharp, incredulous bark of sound. "You're telling me," she said, leaning back in her chair, "a kobold learned zoning control." No one laughed with her. Eyes Wallenstein sat quietly beside Finn, hands resting in her lap. Her gaze remained fixed on the projection. Not defensive, not distant. Observant. "The creature also issued commands," the director continued. "Lesser units responded in coordinated formations." "That breaches the intelligence threshold," Reveria said flatly. "Yes," the director agreed. "Which is why this meeting exists." A senior guild official stood, unable to remain seated. "This is a failure of containment," he said. "If the upper floors are no longer safe, we must close them temporarily." "And cripple the city economy?" Another official snapped. "Do you know what that would do to supply chains?" Murmurs escalated. Shakti raised a hand, not aggressively, but decisively. "The Ganesha Familia can reinforce patrols," she said. "Publicly. Calm the population." "That addresses fear," Finn said, "not causation." Philvis leaned forward. "The dungeon is not reacting randomly. Something has shifted its behavior." Dionysus smiled faintly. "Or someone has encouraged it." Eyes turned. Philvis met his gaze. "Careful." Dionysus lifted his glass slightly. "I am." The director interjected. "Let us remain focused. The most alarming detail is not the alpha's existence, but its targeting logic." He nodded toward Ice. "Adventurer Wallenstein, please." Ice stood. She did not posture. She did not dramatize. "I encountered the alpha kobold while responding to an emergency signal," she said evenly. "It was engaged with a wounded adventurer and 2 supporters." Her eyes flicked briefly, just briefly, toward Finn. "The creature assessed threat levels," she continued. "It redirected lesser units to isolate the injured party. It attempted psychological pressure." A ripple of discomfort passed through the chamber. "It tried to break him," I said. The director folded his hands. "This suggests social cognition." "No," Philvis corrected softly. "It suggests learning through observation." Bel Cranel, the name had hovered like an unspoken taboo. Now it landed. "Bel Cranel," the director said. Every representative reacted differently. Finn's eyes narrowed, calculating. Loki tilted her head, interest sharpening. Shakti frowned, not in suspicion, but concern. Miak's representative shifted uncomfortably. Hedden Selland, standing in Freya's stead, remained utterly still. The injured adventurer Wallenstein referenced, the director said, was Bel Cranel, a registered beginner, Falna locked by an unknown deity. That alone is unacceptable, a guild official snapped. An unreadable Falna is a liability. Miak's voice cut in, quiet, firm. He is a patient, he said, not a weapon. Another official scoffed. He survived longer than expected against an alpha anomaly. That makes him relevant. It makes him lucky, Loki said lazily. I shook her head once. No. The word was soft, but absolute. He adapted, she said. Mid-battle. Not fast enough, but he recognized the problem. Finn exhaled slowly. How long did he last, he asked. Ice answered without hesitation. Long enough that the Alpha changed tactics. That landed harder than any statistic. A senior official muttered, That's not luck. Phylvis tilted her head. Or perhaps it is. Luck has a way of gathering attention. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Not because they lacked opinions, because what had been laid bare was no longer a tactical problem, it was a structural one. Finn Damney was the first to break the silence. If this alpha kobold selectively targeted beginners, he said slowly, fingers interlaced, then this was not a random threat. It was an optimization. A guild official frowned. You're suggesting intent. I'm suggesting selection, Finn replied. If the dungeon removes rookies before they accumulate experience, Orario doesn't just lose manpower, it loses its future. That drew eyes. Beginner adventurers are not expendable, Finn continued. They are investments. Every level 5 standing today survived 100 early mistakes. Remove that growth phase, and 10 years from now we have no elites. A murmur rippled across the table, this time sharp, uneasy. Reverio Jos Alf leaned forward, expression grave. This is not predation, she said. It is unnatural selection. The term landed like a blade. The dungeon is no longer producing random obstacles, Reveria continued. It is pruning outcomes. That implies preference. Shakti Varma crossed her arms. If that's true, then this isn't a monster problem. It's a demographic collapse. A guild economist inhaled sharply. Do you realize what that means for the magic stone market? Several heads turned, some annoyed, some attentive. Beginner floors supply light source stones, heating crystals, household enchantment cores, the economist pressed. If we restrict access, prices double in weeks. Black markets emerge, foreign trade tightens. And if we don't restrict them, another official snapped, we feed rookies into a grinder. Hedden Sellen spoke for the first time, voice cool and faintly disdainful. Or, he said, we acknowledge the obvious. Beginners are replaceable. If the dungeon eliminates the unfit, perhaps that is efficiency, not catastrophe. The temperature dropped. Miak's representative rose halfway from his seat. You're suggesting we accept slaughter as filtration. Hedden didn't blink. I'm suggesting sentimentality has no place in survival economics. Finn's gaze hardened. That logic only works if talent is infinite. And is it not? Hedden asked calmly. Finn leaned forward. No, it is not. Talent compounds. Lose the base, the pyramid collapses. The guild director raised a hand, but Reveria spoke before he could. There is a deeper issue you're all avoiding, she said. If a monster is learning, then the dungeon is no longer a factory. She let that sit. It is a mind. The room reacted immediately, some scoffing, some stiffening. That's mythology, a guild official said. No, Reveria replied. It is observation. Learning implies memory. Memory implies evaluation. She turned slightly, addressing Finn but projecting to all. We are not facing a mutated kobold. We are facing the possibility that the dungeon is testing variables. Silence followed. Then Loki laughed. A short, sharp bark that cut the tension without easing it. You're all acting like the dungeon woke up grumpy today, she said. You ever consider it woke up because someone kicked it? Eyes turned. Loki tilted her head, grin sharp. Monsters change. Kids show up unreadable. Alpha appears. Maybe the dungeon isn't evolving. She leaned back. Maybe it's responding. That drew a low murmur. Uncomfortable. Speculative. The guild director exhaled. Which brings us to Bel Cranel. The name hit the chamber like a dropped glass. The wounded adventurer encountered by the Alpha Kobold, the director said evenly, was Bel Cranel, registered beginner. Falna locked by an unidentified deity. A senior official slammed a palm against the table. That alone is grounds for investigation. The guild's authority rests on Falna transparency. Another official nodded sharply. If power exists outside the status system, we lose informational control. He could be using illegal sorcery. Or divine heresy, someone muttered. Miak's representative stood fully now. He is a patient, not a criminal. And yet, the first official shot back, he performed at a level inconsistent with his classification. Finn closed his eyes briefly. Bel Cranel is a legal loophole, he said. That silenced the room. Our entire regulatory system assumes fauna readability, Finn continued. If an adventurer can grow, fight, and survive without visible metrics, then our classifications are no longer law, they're suggestions. Shakti frowned. That undermines guild authority. It undermines predictability, Finn corrected. And predictability is safety. Hedden's lips curved faintly. Or opportunity. Eyes snapped to him. If Bel Cranel survived an alpha anomaly, Hedden said, then either the monster was flawed or the boy is tainted. Ice's hand moved an inch toward the hilt of Desperate. It wasn't a threat, it was a reflex. Riveria placed a calming hand on her shoulder before the air in the room could sharpen. Hedden continued, unfazed. Remove him. Refine him. Observe whether the dungeon reacts again. That would answer many questions. Miak's voice was steel. You're proposing to use him as bait. I'm proposing experimentation, Hedden replied coolly, which the dungeon has already begun. Riveria's fingers tightened around her staff. This is not a laboratory. This is a city. And cities survive by making unpleasant choices, Hedden said. Filvis Chalia leaned forward, eyes bright with something unsettling. What if the correlation is inverted? She asked softly. The room stilled. What if the monster did not evolve to hunt beginners, but to hunt him? A chill spread. Bel Cranel arrived, Filvis continued. Shortly after anomalies begin, adaptive intelligence manifests, selective pressure increases. She looked around the table. What if his presence is the catalyst? A guild official whispered. You're saying he caused this. I'm saying the dungeon may be reacting to something it recognizes as foreign, Filvis replied. Loki whistled low. Oof, that makes the kid radioactive. Ice stood. No, she said quietly. But the word carried weight. The room turned. The Alpha changed tactics because Bel fought it, Ice continued. Not because he existed. He was not the cause. He was the stimulus. Finn nodded slowly. A difference with consequences. A monster that thinks, Finn added, is a monster that can wait. He looked around the table. And a dungeon that waits is a dungeon that wins. That line settled heavily. A guild economist swallowed. If this spreads to deeper floors... Finn finished the thought. Then expedition doctrine fails. Riveria's voice was grave. Phalanx tactics, feints, kill zones. If a Floor 37 monster learns formation warfare, we lose veterans, Shakti said flatly. And Aurario, the director added. The room fractured, not loudly, but decisively. One camp argued for containment, close floors, suppress information, preserve order. Another for adaptation, revise doctrine, accept casualties, evolve faster. A third, quieter, colder, saw exploitation, provoke responses, harvest data, weaponize evolution. And in the center of all of it, Bel Cranel lay unconscious. He is not a weapon, Miak's representative repeated. And he is not a child anymore, a guild official replied. Finn raised a hand. He is neither solution nor cause. He paused. He is proof. Proof that the dungeon's rules were no longer one-sided. The guild director stood. We will not sacrifice the future to preserve the present, he said. Nor will we gamble the present chasing answers we cannot yet control. He listed the measures, each heavier than the last. Reinforced patrols on beginner floors, quiet reclassification protocols, economic stabilization measures, controlled information release, continued observation of Bel Cranel, not protection, not exploitation, observation. And understand this, the director concluded. If the dungeon is testing us, then how we respond now determines whether Aurario adapts or is selected out. No one argued. Because for the first time, they all understood the same thing. This was no longer about a monster. It was about whether humanity still belonged in the dungeon at all. The director stood again. This council is adjourned, he said. But this issue is not resolved. He looked each representative in the eye. The dungeon has crossed a line, whether intentionally or not. How we respond will define Aurario's future. Chairs scraped. Papers were gathered. But the tension did not disperse with the people. It followed them out, into the halls, into the city, into the dungeon itself, because no one left with certainty, only with questions. And fractures, small now, but growing. The door closed softly behind Ainatula. The sound lingered longer than it should have. The guild director did not move at once. He remained seated on the couch, elbows resting on his knees, hands loosely clasped, eyes fixed on the floor, as if the marble might offer answers where people had failed. The tea Aina had left steamed quietly on the low table. its warmth already beginning to fade. For the first time since the meeting began, the room was truly his. He exhaled. "Isn't it about time you stopped lurking in the shadows?" he said. The words were not loud. They didn't need to be. The air shifted. Light near the far bookshelf bent, as if viewed through heat rising from stone. Shadows stretched where none should have existed, folding inward, peeling away. The illusion collapsed with the faintest shimmer, revealing a man who had not so much entered the room as decided to be visible. Knight's armor caught the lamplight, well-maintained, but scarred in the quiet ways that spoke of fights never recorded. Golden hair framed a face that wore irreverence like a shield, lips already curved into a half-smirk. Gaius inclined his head. "I had to," he said lightly. "The air in here was so thick with Finn Dimni's ambition and Loki's boredom, I thought I'd suffocate." The director didn't look amused. "Gaius," he said flatly. "Stop." The smirk lingered for half a heartbeat longer, then vanished. "You heard Riveria," the director continued, lifting his gaze at last. "She believes the dungeon has a mind." Gaius straightened. "No," he said quietly. "She's wrong." That alone was enough to raise the temperature in the room. "It doesn't have a mind," Gaius continued. "It has an immune system." The director's fingers tightened around the porcelain cup. "And right now," Gaius went on, voice losing its humor entirely, "it's acting like it just detected a virus." Silence settled, thick, deliberate. "A virus?" the director asked. "You mean the Alpha?" Gaius shook his head once. "No," he said. "I mean the boy." The words did not echo. They didn't need to. The director leaned forward, forearms braced against his knees. "Explain." Gaius stepped away from the bookshelf and into the center of the room, boots quiet against stone. "I've spent more time in the dark than any of those officials at that table," he said. "I've watched monsters adapt in ways that never make it into reports. And I'm telling you this now, monsters don't learn zoning control because they're clever." He met the director's eyes. "They learn because something is hunting them." The director's brow furrowed. "The Alpha Kobold was the hunter." "No," Gaius replied. "It was the prey." The words landed hard. "That Alpha wasn't pruning beginners," Gaius continued. "It was fortifying territory, controlling space, creating kill zones, not because it wanted rookies dead, but because it was afraid." The director's grip tightened. "Afraid of what?" Gaius didn't answer immediately. "Of something it didn't understand," he said at last. "Something that didn't fit the rules it evolved under." The director's voice dropped. "Bell Cranel," Gaius nodded once. "I said the boy was wounded," the director said. "That he barely survived." "And that," Gaius replied, "is the part that doesn't fit." He paced slowly, gauntleted fingers brushing the spines of old ledgers. "If Bell Cranel were just a lucky rookie," he said, "the dungeon would ignore him. Luck doesn't register. It doesn't propagate. It doesn't force adaptation." He stopped. "But if he's something else," Gaius continued, "something old, something from before the gods standardized the world, before Falna made growth predictable, then the dungeon doesn't see a child." He looked back at the director. "It sees an anomaly that can't be classified." The director felt a chill creep beneath his collar. "You're suggesting?" "I'm saying," Gaius cut in, "that the dungeon doesn't hate him. It fears what he represents." The director rose slowly from the couch. "If Bell is just a catalyst," he said, "then Filvis was right." "Yes," Gaius replied. "And no." The director frowned. "Explain." "He's not the cause," Gaius said. "He's the trigger. The difference matters." He gestured vaguely upward toward the city, the tower, the dungeon beneath it all. The dungeon was stable under the gods because Falna made growth legible, measurable, containable. Even rebellion had parameters, Gaius said. But Bell's Falna is locked. His growth doesn't broadcast. His techniques don't read as divine. Gaius's eyes sharpened. "To the dungeon, that looks like a foreign body." The director's mind raced. "An immune response." "Exactly," Gaius said. "Localized at first. Upper floors, probes, pressure tests." "The demon," the director whispered. Gaius nodded. "That wasn't a random incursion," he said. "That was the dungeon reaching up, searching outside itself for the anomaly it sensed within." The director clenched his jaw. "And the Alpha Kobold?" "A white blood cell," Gaius replied. "Improvised, panicking, overcompensating." The room felt suddenly smaller. "If you're right," the director said slowly, "then my order to observe Bell is a death sentence," Gaius finished. The director turned sharply. "Watch your tone." "I am," Gaius said evenly. "That's the problem." He stepped closer. "If you just observe him," Gaius continued, "you're not neutral. You're passive, and passivity tells the dungeon one thing. Escalate." The director stared at him. "You're saying something bigger is coming." I'm saying, Gaius replied, that a kobold was the first antibody. He let the implication hang. You asked me to befriend him, Gaius said. Fine. But understand this, I won't just be gathering information. The director's voice was tight. Then what will you be doing? I'll be standing between that kid, Gaius said, and a dungeon that wants him erased before he reaches the deep floors. Silence pressed in. You're asking for permission to interfere, the director said. No, Gaius replied. I'm telling you interference is already happening. I'm just choosing a side. The director turned away, pacing once, twice. Aranis's doctrine is clear, he said. Observe. Do not intervene. Gaius didn't flinch. Doctrine assumes the system is stable. The director stopped. And you believe it isn't. I believe, Gaius said carefully, that the Age of Gods taught the world to forget how to fight without permission. He met the director's gaze again, and Bel Cranel fights like someone who never learned that lesson. The director was silent. Gaius continued, quieter now. I've seen technique before divinity, he said. Movements that don't rely on blessings, cuts that come from discipline, not amplification. The gods call it luck because they don't recognize it anymore. He smiled faintly. But the dungeon does. The director closed his eyes. When did you start suspecting this? He asked. When the Alpha didn't go for the kill, Gaius replied. When it tested him instead. A long breath left the director's lungs. If this gets out, he said, Bel becomes a target. From the guild, from the familias, from gods who don't like being reminded they're not necessary. And from the dungeon, Gaius added. The director opened his eyes. Then your role is no longer unofficial, he said. Gaius raised an eyebrow. You will shadow him, the director continued. Not as a guard, not as an agent, as a person. Gaius chuckled softly. That might be the hardest assignment yet. If anyone moves against him, the director said, I need to know before steel leaves a sheath. And if the dungeon moves? Gaius asked. The director hesitated. Then you make sure, he said slowly, that Bel Cranel survives long enough for us to understand why. Gaius inclined his head, this time without humor. One more thing, the director added. Gaius paused at the edge of the light. If you're wrong, the director said, and Bel truly is the cause, then protecting him delays the inevitable, Gaius said. I know. The director held his gaze. And if you're right? Gaius smiled again, sharp and knowing. Then the dungeon just remembered something it was never supposed to forget. He vanished without sound, light folding in on itself as if he had never been there. The guild director stood alone. Outside the windows, Orario slept, unaware that beneath its streets, beneath its doctrines, beneath even its gods, something ancient had stirred. He lifted his tea, now cold, and stared into its surface. Grow, he murmured, and wondered whether Orario could survive the boy's growth.
Thank you for listening. I truly appreciate your time and support.